Chapter 968. 968 Staring at D.E. Old man, who do you think you are? Lu Ming glanced at the Wang family master and continued, what do you mean you won't pursue it? It was you and those old fogies who besieged me back then. I should be the one to hold you accountable. Do I need you to not hold you accountable? What a joke. A faint voice filled with contempt reverberated throughout the entire area, causing some people to be dumbfounded. Contempt. This was blatant contempt. Lu Ming was looking down on a supreme martial artist. The Wang family head said that he would not pursue the matter with Lu Ming, but Lu Ming's meaning was clear. Did he need the Wang family head to not pursue the matter? The one who should be held accountable was him, Lu Ming. What a big tone, what great confidence. However, at this moment, no one felt that Lu Ming was arrogant. Even Wang Fengchen had been defeated by Lu Ming. He had the right to be arrogant. In the future, there was a high possibility that he would strive for the supreme being position. By then, why would he need to fear the Wang family head? The patriarch of the Wang clan's face was completely red. He was extremely angry. How many years had it been? Ever since he had stepped into the position of a supreme martial artist, no one had dared to speak to him in such a manner for many years. No one had dared to look down on him. Even the other supreme martial artists would be polite to him. But now, he was being looked down upon by a young man in his 20s. This was an insult to him. Lu Ming transformed back into his human form. He sneered and said, Old man, let's take a step back. You said that you won't pursue this matter, but can you represent the Emperor in Heaven Divine Palace? Then, he looked at Martial Emperor D.E. The Wang family master and the others also looked at Martial Emperor D.E. That's right, the Wang family master did not have the final say in the Emperor in Heaven Divine Palace. It was Martial Emperor D.E. At this moment, Martial Emperor Di-Yi's eyes shot out two cold rays of light as he stared at Lu Ming. Lu Ming was not afraid at all. He looked at Martial Emperor Di-Yi with a hint of provocation in his eyes. Everyone was shocked. Lu Ming was so audacious that he dared to look at Martial Emperor Di-Yi in the eye. However, Martial Emperor Di-Yi didn't say a word. The light in his eyes disappeared, and he regained his calm. The patriarch of the Wang family had an ugly expression on his face, and Wang Fengchen was filled with despair. Martial Emperor Di-Yi's attitude explained everything. Kill. Suddenly, Lu Ming moved. His body was like lightning as he charged toward Wang Fengchen. No! Wang Fengchen roared and tried his best to resist. However, he was severely injured and did not have much energy left. How could he be Lu Ming's match? In just a few moves, his bones and tendons were broken, and he spat out large mouthfuls of blood, falling to the ground like a dead dog. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming stepped onto the fighting ring and a long spear appeared in his hand. He walked toward Wang Fengchen, his cold killing intent covering Wang Fengchen's entire body. No, don't kill me, I don't want to die. He shouted. Run! Wang Fengchen roared as he twisted his body in an attempt to escape. His eyes were filled with endless fear. In his life, he had killed countless people and slaughtered countless heavens chosen. But now that he was about to die at the hands of another heavens chosen, he was so terrified. Whoosh! Under everyone's gaze, the spear pierced through Wang Fengchen's heart. The powerful qi burst out and crushed Wang Fengchen's heart. Old ancestor, avenge me! Wang Fengchen let out an unwilling roar before his life was extinguished. A proud son of heaven had been killed by Lu Ming here. Everyone sighed in their hearts. If such a heaven's favorite didn't die, he would definitely be a figure who would dominate the Eastern Barren territory in the future. It would be no problem for him to become a supreme martial artist. Unfortunately, there were countless heaven's favorites in the world, but how many of them could grow up? A dead heaven's favorite was destined to be a stepping stone for others. Lu Ming, I'll kill you. The master of the Wang family roared and exploded with cold killing intent. His eyes were red, and his heart was bleeding. This time, the Wang clan had suffered too heavy a loss. The Wang family had 4 heaven's favorites in the top 100. However, 2 of them had already died before. Now, even the most talented Wang Fenchen was dead. There was only one person left in the Wang family. Originally, the Wang clan had 4 geniuses in the top 100 of the list of top 1,000 talents in a generation. How glorious was that? It was as though they wanted to see the Wang clan rise up rapidly and even surpass the other 5 ancient aristocratic families, becoming the leader of the ancient aristocratic families in the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. However, everything was in vain now. His hatred for Lu Ming could not be washed away even if he used all the water in the world. Old man, this is what I wanted to say as well. This is only a small interest. In the future, I will personally take your dog head. Oh, I forgot to tell you, that Wang Yan and Wang Chen were also killed by me. Lu Ming said coldly, a cold smile hanging on his face. You deserve to die. The master of the Wang family roared in anger. Originally, as a supreme martial artist who had lived for thousands of years, he had a firm mind and had seen many storms. He would not be so easily angered. However, he could not remain calm when facing Lu Ming. In the Battle of 9 Dragons, he was almost beaten to death by Lu Ming. Now, many of the Wang family's geniuses had died at Lu Ming's hands. He hated Lu Ming to the core. If it was not for the fact that his cultivation was completely suppressed in the ancient city of Providence, he would have crushed Lu Ming's bones and scattered his ashes. He took a few deep breaths before he slowly calmed down. At this moment, Lu Ming's fate dragon had devoured Wang Fenchen's fate dragon. Lu Ming's fate dragon had grown to 500 feet and was now close to 2,000 feet. At the same time, the devouring power burst forth and turned Wang Fenchen into a dried corpse. He kept his storage ring and kicked him off the fighting ring. This made the Wang clan leader so angry that he almost vomited blood. Lu Ming moved and returned to the stands. Ha, you're amazing, Lu Ming. You've avenged me. That Wang Fenchen looked so arrogant, but he dared to burn me with fire. He's a dead dog now. The fatty laughed out loud. He was so excited that his mouth cracked open. Also, Lu Ming, did you see that the old man from the Wang family was so angry that his face was the color of a pig's liver and smoke was coming out of his head? It was really exciting. Fatty continued to laugh. He didn't lower his voice at all, and it spread to the entire area. The patriarch of the Wang family, who had calmed down with great difficulty, suddenly became furious again, and his whole body trembled with anger. The juniors deserved to die. He roared in his heart. Yan Kuangtu took a few sips of wine and laughed even more heartily. The others were speechless. These people were simply lawless and didn't know how to write fear. The battle continued, and 2 more pillars of light landed on 2 more figures. Ao2 of the Heavenly Demon Valley and Dongfang Yu of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. Many people's eyes were filled with a shocking light. It was another highlight. Dongfang Yu was ranked 3rd on the list of top 1,000 talents, while Ao2 was said to be able to compete with divine emperors. The battle between the 2 would definitely be exciting. The 2 figures landed on the fighting ring. Without saying anything, the battle immediately broke out. Dongfang Yu was incomparably powerful. He had cultivated 2 kinds of deity-level cultivation techniques, and his cultivation was also at the early stage of the 8th level spirit embryo realm. His bloodline was the same as Wang Fenchen's, a 7th level deity bloodline. Dongfang Yu's overall strength was even slightly stronger than Wang Fenchen's. However, Ao2 was even stronger. Ao2 had more than 70% of a true dragon's bloodline, almost 80%. He had transformed into a flood dragon and was fighting Dongfang Yu like a real dragon. The 2 of them fought for more than 50 moves. In the end, Dongfang Yu was defeated and admitted defeat. She had lost 90% of her luck. Meanwhile, AO2's fate energy rose greatly, and the length of his fate dragon broke through 300 meters. Chapter 969. 969 Chapter 969 Top 4. The battle continued. When AO2 and Dongfang Yu descended from the sky, two beams of light shot out. One landed on the Sky Corp's Sex Corpse warrior, while the other landed on the Divine Emperor. The Emperor God was about to fight. At this moment, everyone was highly focused. The Emperor God was considered the top genius in the East Baron. How powerful was he? In the battle for Providence, he had not met any decent opponents. Those who had encountered him were all easily killed. His strength was simply unfathomable in everyone's hearts. Now, could Corpse Warrior, ranked 4th on the list of top 1,000 talents, force the Emperor God to show his true strength? Everyone was filled with anticipation. Even Lu Ming was in high spirits. In his mind, the Emperor God was his ultimate opponent. Two figures landed on the fighting ring. Shi Zhan's eyes were filled with solemnness. Just admit defeat. The Emperor God's indifferent voice was heard. He was straight and handsome. Just by standing there, he had the aura of a king. There was a kind of aura that could swallow the world and was invincible. Yes, the Emperor God had never been defeated by the younger generation. He was a heaven's favorite who had the potential to become an emperor in the future. The last heaven's favorite who was thought to have the potential to become an emperor was Yan Kuangtu, and that had been 100 years ago. He was telling the Corpse Warrior to admit defeat. In my heart, I've never admitted defeat. Even if it's you, God Emperor. A strong battle intent appeared in the eyes of the Corpse Warrior. I'll defeat you in 10 moves. The Emperor God's indifferent voice was filled with great confidence. Bang! He took a step forward, and a shocking sword chi burst out from his body and shot into the sky. A terrifying sword power spread out towards Corpse Battle. Roar! With a loud roar, Corpse Warrior directly burst out his bloodline. It was a skeleton, a huge skeleton shaped like a huge elephant. The skeleton of an ancient war elephant. Someone muttered as he recognized the skeleton. It was a skeleton formed by a powerful divine beast with 7 golden chakra rings. It was also a divine level rank 7 bloodline. Shi Zhan performed the bloodline fusion and turned into a skeleton of an ancient war elephant. He stepped on the ground and attacked the Emperor God with amazing power. However, the Emperor God's eyes were still calm. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out as a purple gold sword light shot into the sky. It was filled with a luxurious aura. Boom! The purple gold sword chi crossed dozens of miles and slashed at the ancient war elephant skeleton. With a terrifying boom, the sword chi shot out in all directions, and the ancient war elephant skeleton was forced to retreat. Buzz! Buzz! Whoosh! The sound of the sword rang out continuously, and sword chi burst out one after another. Each one was more terrifying than the previous one, and it continuously slashed towards the ancient war elephant skeleton. The ancient war elephant roared and used all its strength to fight against the Emperor God's sword chi. However, with every strike it received, it would be forced back 5 miles. After 9 strikes, the ancient war elephant had retreated nearly 50 miles. Then, with a bang, the ancient war elephant exploded and turned back into a corpse warrior. The corpse warrior's face was pale and he spat out blood. His body trembled as if he couldn't even stand. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. I admit defeat. Corpse warrior heaved a long sigh. With corpse warrior's surrender, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and looked at the Emperor God in shock. He was too powerful. The Emperor God was too powerful. He said that he would defeat the corpse in 10 moves, and he really only used 10 moves from start to finish, and the corpse admitted defeat. The Emperor God hadn't even performed the bloodline fusion. The Emperor God is too powerful. No one can defeat him. Even Ao2 and Xue Jiani are no match for him. That's right. Until now, I don't even know how much combat strength he has used. It's truly terrifying and unfathomable. Many people were discussing in shock. Even the supreme beings could no longer remain calm. Only the three sovereigns remained calm. On the grandstand, Xue Jianyi and Ao2's eyes were extremely solemn. Lu Ming's eyes were solemn. Lu Ming, are you confident in defeating the Emperor Gods? Du Songjue asked Lu Ming in a low voice. I'm not confident. Lu Ming shook his head. He wasn't confident. Even if he used all his power, he still wouldn't be confident. Corpse Warrior's combat strength was no weaker than Wang Fengqian's, but he was still easily defeated by the Emperor God. His combat strength was simply unfathomable. His cultivation should still be at the 8th level of the spirit embryo realm, but he should have reached the peak of the 8th level. However, I'm not too sure about the martial techniques he cultivates and the level of his bloodline. Yan Kuangtu said. You've been in the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace for so many years, yet you're still not clear about this? Du Songjue said. Yan Kuangtu shook his head and said, Di Shin has been secretly trained by De. I know little about him. Lu Ming, if you really can't defeat Di Shin, just admit defeat. Finally, Yan Kuangtu said to Lu Ming. Lu Ming's eyes flashed but he did not answer. Are you really no match for him? What if I make another breakthrough? Lu Ming had many thoughts in his mind. Unfortunately, I'm still a little short. It's getting harder and harder to raise my cultivation. Lu Ming pondered secretly. The bloodline of the 9 dragons continued to refine Wang Fengqian's blood essence. At this time, the refinement was almost complete, but his cultivation was still at the peak of the 7th level spirit embryo realm. According to Yan Kuangtu, the Emperor God's cultivation was at the peak of the 8th level spirit embryo realm. If Lu Ming's cultivation also broke through to the 8th level spirit embryo realm, he would be more confident. Lu Ming was confident that he was not afraid of anyone at the same level. Then let's start refining the raw gemstones. At the thought of this, a large number of raw gemstones appeared in Lu Ming's hands. The devouring power in his palms burst forth and devoured the large number of raw gemstones, starting to refine them. The Emperor God won and took 90% of Corpse Warrior's luck, returning to the stands. The next battle was between Blood Sword 1 and Feng Xian of the Sky Demon Valley. Feng Xian of the Sky Demon Valley had the Phoenix bloodline and had also reached more than 70% of her power. She was extremely powerful and fast. She was fighting against Xue Jianyi at the peak. This battle could be said to be the most intense of the 4. The two of them exchanged a full 200 moves before the victor was decided. In the end, Blood Sword 1 won by a small margin. At this point, the strongest top 4 had appeared. They were Lu Ming, the Emperor God, Ao2, and Blood Sword 1. Next, it was the battle between the 4 of them. After these few battles, Lu Ming had a rough idea of everyone's abilities. Dong Fangyu, Corpse Warrior, and Wang Fengqian's strength were very close and on the same level. As for Feng Xian, she was slightly stronger than the 3 of them, not much weaker than Blood Sword 1. Blood Sword 1, Ao2, and Feng Xian should be on the same level. On the other hand, the Emperor God was unfathomable and difficult to predict. Lu Ming's thoughts were similar to most of the people. In other people's hearts, Lu Ming's abilities were placed on the same level as Blood Sword 1, Ao2, and Feng Xian. Lu Ming could kill Wang Fengqian, but if Blood Sword 1, Ao2, and the others were to unleash their full power, they could also kill Wang Fengqian. However, there was no doubt that the Emperor God was placed in the most powerful position. Chapter 970. 970 The Great Battle against Ao2. Among the 4 of them, Di Shen, Xue Jiani, and Ao2 had long been known as the most powerful representatives of the younger generation in the East Baron. Lu Ming, on the other hand, was a dark horse. What really made him famous in the Eastern Barren territory was the battle in Nine Dragons. That battle had involved too many experts. In the ancient Saint dynasty of the central continent, the supremes of the 6 great ancient families, Yen Kuangtu, 9 sons supreme, and even martial emperor De. After this battle, Lu Ming's name shook the Eastern Barren territory. However, the most famous one was that Lu Ming could control the divine 9-dragon cauldron that had never moved. As for Lu Ming's own talent, it was neglected. Many people felt that Lu Ming's talent and combat strength were not particularly top-notch. He could not even be compared to the top 100 on the list of top 1,000 talents. However, Lu Ming had overturned everyone's thoughts with his actions. As it turned out, Lu Ming's talent was unparalleled. He was no weaker than anyone else. As a dark horse, he had rushed into the top 4 and killed Luo Tian and Wang Fenchen. Now, he was going to fight with the 3 most powerful heaven's favorites in the Eastern Barren territory. Although Lu Ming is talented, he's too young and aggressive. He doesn't know how to restrain himself. He has offended the master of the Wang family, martial emperor De, and even the supreme of the heavenly demon valley. Such a genius is destined to die. That's right. In history, there have been many heaven's favorites with unparalleled talent. However, not many of them made it to the end and became the emperor. He was too sharp and didn't know how to restrain himself, and in the end, he died a tragic death. That's true. In my opinion, Lu Ming will end up like this in the end. Many people were discussing in low voices. At this moment, the vortex in the talisman amulet sect flickered and a figure appeared. Bai Shijin. Lu Ming was overjoyed to see Bai Shijin. Senior, how is it? Lu Ming said. Don't worry, everything has been settled. They are now in Mount Liangyi. Bai Shijin said. Many thanks, Senior. Lu Ming expressed his thanks. At this moment, a ray of light fell on Lu Ming. He was about to fight. Lu Ming looked over and realized that another beam of light had landed on AO2's body. This battle was between Lu Ming and AO2. Instantly, AO2's eyes shone with a brilliant light and a shocking battle intent. Boom! AO2's burly body crashed heavily into the fighting ring. His entire body was filled with a violent aura. Lu Ming took a step forward and appeared on the fighting ring, standing opposite AO2. Bai Shijin was extremely surprised. He didn't know what had happened, but after understanding it, he was even more shocked. He did not expect that Lu Ming would be able to kill Wang Fenchen and fight against AO2. Lu Ming, it's such a waste of the 9-dragon bloodline in you. Why don't you hand it over to me? I'll definitely make it flourish. AO2 licked his lips, and a greedy look appeared on his face. Okay, but De is also eyeing the 9-dragon bloodline. If I give it to you, aren't you afraid that he will target you? Lu Ming smiled faintly. AO2's expression changed drastically, and his eyes flickered with uncertainty. If that was the case, he would be targeted by Martial Emperor De after obtaining the bloodline of the 9 dragons. He would not be able to live in peace. Even the supreme of the Flood Dragon tribe, or even the Demon Emperor, might not be able to protect him. His heart turned cold at this thought. Hee, looks like you don't dare to take it. You really don't have the guts. Come, let's fight. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with fighting spirit, and the essential core in his body was boiling. Roar! Roar! 2 dragon roars rang out at the same time. One of them came from AO2, who transformed into a flood dragon. The other dragon's roar came from Lu Ming's body. He had burst out with dragon energy. Lu Ming's body was covered in a layer of purple-gold scales. He took a step forward and charged toward AO2. Golden Storm Splitting Slash. AO2 opened his mouth and a dark golden ray of light burst out from it, slashing toward Lu Ming. This ray of light was like a blade ray, but it was sharper and more terrifying. Lu Ming threw a punch and it collided with the dark golden light. Boom! There was a loud explosion. Lu Ming's body trembled and he retreated 100 meters before he could stabilize himself. On his arm, it was as if there were countless sharp forces cutting at his scales, causing sparks to fly in all directions. What a powerful metal attribute concept! He circulated his true essence and shook it, scattering the sharp force covering his arm. AO2 had more than 70% of the true dragon's bloodline. He was born with the control of the metal element, and he could use it to a terrifying extent. The light from the blade just now was the combination of the metal element concept and AO2's demonic power. It was extremely terrifying. Golden storm splitting slash. AO2 roared again. This time, 9 beams of dark golden light shot out from his mouth, cutting through the air and slashing toward Lu Ming. Boom! Lu Ming instantly released 2 more bursts of dragon energy. In total, he released 3 more bursts of dragon energy and his strength increased greatly. Lu Ming was like a human-shaped T-Rex as he charged towards AO2. He activated the prison-suppressing heaven technique and threw out a series of punches. Bang! 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 There were 9 consecutive explosions, and the 9 dark golden rays of light were destroyed by Lu Ming. Lu Ming continued to rush toward AO2. Golden Gilded Dragon Claw. One of AO2's dragon claws had turned completely dark gold, as if it had been cast from dark gold. Whoosh! He stretched out his dark golden dragon claw and swiped at Lu Ming. Clang! Lu Ming threw a punch and it collided with the dark golden dragon claw, creating a terrifying boom. It was like 2 iron hammers had collided, forming a strong storm that swept in all directions. Lu Ming's body trembled and he drifted backward for 100 meters. He landed on the ground and took 9 steps back. What a terrifying power, what a terrifying attack. Is this a flood dragon with over 70% purity? Lu Ming was shocked. AO2's level should be at the middle stage of the 8th tier of the 7th level, which was equivalent to the middle stage of the 8th tier of the spirit embryo realm. His strength and attack power were extremely powerful and terrifying. And this was only a flood dragon with more than 70% purity. If it was a pure-blooded true dragon, how terrifying and powerful would it be? Nowadays, there were very few pure-blooded divine beasts in the divine wilderness continent. It was said that there were quite a few in ancient times. How could such pure-blooded divine beasts, the pride of the human race, compete with them? Now, the only known thing in the East continent was that the demon emperor was a pure-blood. I wonder if there are many pure-blooded divine beasts in the mysterious overseas continent. Lu Ming, you're not my match. AO2 roared, interrupting Lu Ming's jumbled thoughts. Bang! Bang! The flood dragon stomped its 4 claws on the ground and charged toward Lu Ming. Is that so? The corners of Lu Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. The 9-dragon bloodline emerged. The next moment, Lu Ming transformed into 9 dragons. At the same time, another dragon energy burst out from his body, making it 4 in total. A vast dragon's might filled the air and surged toward AO2. AO2's body trembled slightly, and a hint of fear actually appeared in his eyes. That's right, this was an instinct that came from AO2. It was a fear he had for those in a higher position. No matter if it was a demonic beast or a divine beast, the hierarchy was extremely strict. Bloodline was superior, and there were layers of suppression. AO2 only had the bloodline of the true dragon, but he was not a true dragon yet. However, the 9 dragons were existences that were even more powerful than the true dragon. They were one of the top 10 war beasts, and the dragon's might that emanated from the 9 dragons made AO2 feel an instinctive fear. Chapter 971. 971 Clash of Swords. Roar! The 9 dragons let out long roars, and their dragon might permeated the air. Their 9 claws stepped on the air as they pounced toward Ao Sha. AO2 followed suit and roared. He overcame the fear in his heart and pounced toward Lu Ming. The Flood Dragon and the 9 dragons immediately fought each other on the fighting ring. AO2 had unleashed his metal element mentality to the extreme. His metal element mentality was definitely equivalent to the 4th level. His entire body was as hard as metal, and his dragon claws seemed to be made of dark gold. They were incomparably hard and could break anything. Every move had terrifying power. As for Lu Ming, he had 4 types of concepts surrounding him. When they were fused together, the power was equally terrifying. At the same time, Lu Ming burst forth with 4 streams of dragon energy and circulated the prison-suppressing heaven technique. Every inch of his muscles was able to burst forth with the power of the prison-suppressing heaven technique. Every muscle on his body was frighteningly powerful, and every claw had the power to suppress everything. Boom! 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 The 2 dragons intertwined with each other and continuously attacked each other. It was extremely barbaric, and it made people feel as if they had returned to ancient times, where divine beasts fought for hegemony and true dragons fought in chaos. Pucci. The 9 dragons had 9 claws, and AO2 found it difficult to block all of them. His body was grabbed by the claws of the 9 dragons, and they tore at him with all their might. Instantly, his scales were sent flying, and a large piece of his flesh was torn off, causing blood to flow out. AO2 retaliated with all his might in pain, tearing off a piece of the 9 dragons' bodies as well. However, his claws had almost been shattered. Boom! The bodies of the 9 dragons seemed to be extremely heavy. They pressed down on AO2, causing him to crash into the fighting ring, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The 2 of them exchanged dozens of moves. Lu Ming's courage grew as the battle progressed and he gradually gained the upper hand. In the end, AO2 was still affected by the aura of the 9 dragons. He was somewhat afraid, and the more he fought, the more fearful he became. He was already afraid. How could he be Lu Ming's match? Blood splattered everywhere as AO2 let out a blood-curdling screech. His body had been torn apart by the claws of the 9 dragons. He struggled with all his might, and in the end, he managed to escape. However, he left behind a large piece of flood dragon meat, which was drenched in blood. Flood dragon meat that contains 70% of a true dragon's concentration. Good stuff, leave it for barbecue. The 9 dragons opened their mouths and Lu Ming's voice was heard. Then, the piece of flood dragon meat disappeared. Lu Ming, that's good stuff. Save a portion for me later. On the grandstand, Fatty shouted, almost drooling. AO2's lungs nearly exploded from anger. He could not wait to swallow Lu Ming and the fatty. Fatty, that's too little. These are mine, I'll get more later. Lu Ming shouted and pounced toward AO2 again. Ah, I admit defeat. AO2 suddenly roared. He was extremely unwilling to accept this. He knew that if he continued fighting, he would definitely lose and would most likely have to pay more flood dragon meat. You're admitting defeat? Lu Ming was speechless. He stopped and transformed back into his human form. He had a look of pity on his face as his eyes darted around AO2's body. AO2 had also transformed into his human form, and his expression was extremely unsightly. He wasn't seriously injured, but his face looked worse than if he had been seriously injured. This battle, he fought too sullenly. The Dragon of Fate above Lu Ming's head devoured 90% of AO2's Dragon of Fate. It expanded again, exceeding 2,000 feet and approaching 3,000 feet. Such a huge fate dragon was rarely seen since ancient times. Lu Ming flew up to the grandstand. Fatty, it's a pity that this guy admitted defeat early. You don't have a share. Lu Ming sighed. Damn it, no way, we'll split that piece equally. The fat man shouted. AO2, who was flying toward the grandstand, trembled and almost fell off the stage. AO2 flew back to the grandstand, and his expression was extremely grim. The Flood Dragon Sovereign's complexion wasn't any better than AO2's, and it was as black as charcoal. Many people were shocked that Lu Ming had won the battle. In this way, Lu Ming had entered the final battle. The next battle was between Dishan and Blood Sword. The winner would fight Lu Ming in the final battle. Most of them thought that between God Emperor and Blood Sword, God Emperor would win. In that case, the final battle would be between Lu Ming and the Emperor God. That would be interesting. The light flashed and enveloped the Emperor God and Blood Sword. The two of them flew onto the fighting ring. Do you and I still need to fight? The Emperor God said coldly. Many people's hearts skipped a beat. From the Emperor's tone, could it be that he had fought with the Blood Sword before? However, he had never heard of such a rumor. I was no match for him in the battle 3 years ago, but that might not be the case now. Blood Sword's body was filled with a shocking amount of blood chi, and his eyes were as red as blood diamonds. The crowd was shocked. Dishan and Xue Jiani had fought 3 years ago. It seemed that Xue Jiani had lost. 3 years ago, you were no match for me. From now on, you will never be my match. The Emperor God's voice came out, showing great confidence. We'll know after the battle. Die. Blood Sword 1 shouted and stepped forward. A terrible sword power burst out from his body and filled the air. This was the sword concept. The Blood Sword took a step forward, and sword intent filled the air. Buzz. The Emperor God's body also produced a sword cry. The next moment, a powerful sword power burst out. It was also sword concept. Dishan and Xue Jiani had both comprehended the sword mentality. Bang! Bang! The two of them were taking steps, and as they stepped forward, their sword intent soared. Buzz! Whoosh! Their sword intents crossed dozens of miles and clashed in the air. The air between the two actually kept exploding with rumbles and sword hums, and sparks flew in all directions. Everyone's expression was grave. This kind of sword intent was too terrifying. The two hadn't even made a move, but just the overflowing sword intent could easily kill a 7th-level spirit embryo realm expert. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, the two of them took a step forward, and their bodies turned into a sword light. They cut through the void and slashed at each other. Clang! The two sword radiances clashed in the air, creating a loud boom. Sword chi shot out in all directions, and the two sword radiances were forced back by the attack before clashing again. Clang! Clang! In an instant, the two of them had exchanged dozens of moves. Those with lower cultivation couldn't even see the two figures. They could only see two sword lights clashing in the air. A golden sword light and a blood-red sword light. But at this moment, the golden sword radiance surged and struck the blood-red sword radiance away. Divine Emperor, peak of the 8th-level spirit embryo realm. Blood Sword 1, late stage of the 8th-level spirit embryo realm. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He could tell their cultivation level. Moreover, both of their sword concepts had reached the 4th level. This was a collision of 4th-level sword concepts. However, it was obvious that the Emperor God's cultivation was stronger. He managed to push back Blood Sword 1. The blood-red sword light flew back, and Blood Sword 1's body appeared. At this moment, the blood-red light on his body was getting brighter and brighter. Blood Sword, unsheath. Blood Sword pinched his fingers and waved his hand. Suddenly, a blood-red combat sword flew out from his glabella. The combat sword grew to more than 10 meters in size. Surprisingly, when the combat sword grew larger, it split into 2, then 4, and finally into 16 huge blood-red combat swords, which flew around Blood Sword. Kill! Kill! Blood Sword 1 shouted and waved his fingers. The 16 combat swords danced and turned into 16 sword lights, attacking the Emperor God. The most terrifying thing was not the 16 combat swords, but the endless sword chi that was stimulated as the combat swords flew. Chapter 972. 972 Concept of Space. The 16 blood-red combat swords, wrapped in endless sword chi, attacked the Emperor God. At that moment, the Emperor God's face turned red. He felt his blood boiling. That's the mentality of blood. Blood Sword 1 has actually combined the mentality of blood and the mentality of sword into one. Someone exclaimed. Lu Ming's eyes narrowed. Xue Jianyi was indeed the second-ranked genius on the list of top 1,000 talents. He was extremely powerful. Not only had he comprehended two powerful intents, but he had also fused them together. Moreover, Lu Ming could tell that Blood Sword 1's blood and sword concepts had both reached the 4th level. How terrifying was the fusion of two 4th-level concepts! Whoosh! 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 The combination of the two essences triggered thousands of sword chi, which completely covered the Emperor God and blocked his way out. Golden sword chi gushed out of the Emperor God's body and he kept slashing. Every time he slashed, endless sword chi would be destroyed, but more blood-red sword chi would replace it. For a moment, the Emperor God was actually at a disadvantage. It can't be. The Emperor God is at a disadvantage. Is he going to be defeated? Blood Sword 1 and 2 wills have reached level 4, and he has successfully integrated them. He is indeed powerful, but the Emperor God should have more tricks up his sleeve. The crowd was in a heated discussion. At that moment, the Emperor God frowned slightly. He had given up on blocking the sword chi and let it pierce his body. Many people's hearts were in their throats. They didn't understand what the Emperor God meant. Whoosh! Whoosh! As the sword light pierced through, the Emperor God's figure collapsed. It was just a phantom. Then, everyone saw that the Emperor God's body had already appeared dozens of meters away. As soon as his figure appeared, sword chi stabbed at him from all directions. However, he took a step forward as if he was taking a stroll in his courtyard. His figure suddenly disappeared and reappeared dozens of meters away the next moment. Just like that, his figure continued to flash, and the endless sword chi from all directions could do nothing to him. Transient step. This is the legendary transient step. Someone shouted in shock. What? Instant step. How was it possible to use the instant step that was said to require one to comprehend the concept of space? Could it be that the Emperor God has comprehended the will of space? My God, it's definitely the space mentality. Exclamations of shock rang out, and those who made the noise were all from the older generation. It's actually the space concept. Bai Shijing, Yan Kuangtu, and the others also gasped. Lu Ming's pupils constricted. There were thousands of types of intent realms in the world, and of course, there were also differences in their level. Among them, there were two extremely famous types of intent realms, which were the space-time intent realm. Time and space. With a myriad of intent realms, time and space were the kings. The time and space intents were the kings of the 10 million intents, so one could see how terrifying they were. However, the Emperor God had actually comprehended the concept of space. I can't believe that the Divine Emperor has comprehended the space mentality and successfully integrated it with the sword mentality. He's indeed the number one on the list of top 1,000 talents. However, his space mentality should only be at the complete stage of level 3 and hasn't broken through to the 4th level. Otherwise, he'd be invincible. Bai Shijing's eyes were solemn. The Emperor God's display of space will made Blood Sword's eyes extremely serious. He kept waving his sword fingers, launching a storm of attacks. However, the Emperor God's body flashed, and the sword chi around him could not do anything to him. Whoosh! Suddenly, the Emperor God slashed out a sword in the air. This sword was only casually swung at the air, as if it was not aimed at Blood Sword 1. However, Blood Sword One's expression suddenly changed and he quickly retreated. Whoosh! Just as Blood Sword One was retreating, a sword light slashed at the spot where he had just been standing. The Emperor God's attack could penetrate the void and launch a terrible attack on Blood Sword. It was strange and terrifying. If the Emperor God became an assassin, he would be the most terrifying assassin in the world. Whoosh! Whoosh! The Emperor God's sword kept slashing out of the air. Then, sword light appeared around Blood Sword One and slashed at him. Blood Sword rapidly retreated. The Emperor God used transient step and chased after Blood Sword. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. It seems like the Emperor God's attack has a distance limit. Lu Ming's eyes flickered and he understood what was going on. There should be a distance limit to the space will of the Emperor God. If the distance was too far, his sword chi couldn't pass through the space to attack others, which was normal. If there was no limit, he could take people's heads from hundreds of millions of miles away, which was more than terrifying. However, as Emperor God's cultivation and space concept improved, the distance would become longer and longer. The further it went, the more terrifying it would be. Time and space were kings, this was not just a saying. As the distance between the two drew closer, the Blood Sword was at a disadvantage and could be defeated at any time. Buzz! At this moment, Blood Sword's spine glowed, and a blood-red combat sword floated above his head. 7 golden chakras surrounded the combat sword. This was Blood Sword One's bloodline, a 7th-level divine bloodline. The blood sword merged with his bloodline and turned into a huge blood-red sword. The sword chi shot up into the sky and slashed out. The space trembled and the sword chi that the Emperor God attacked him with was all shattered. Buzz! The blood-red sword slashed at the Emperor God. Defeat! Tiangang Emperor's Sword. The Emperor God strode forward and spat out a word coldly. He pointed his sword forward and slashed down. Voila! At this moment, the space above Blood Sword Yi's head seemed to shatter as boundless sword chi slashed down towards Blood Sword Yi. That's a low-grade divine level martial technique, and it's a low-grade divine level bloodline martial technique. A supreme martial artist cried out in shock. Everyone present was shocked and their eyes widened. The divine martial technique was a low-grade divine bloodline martial technique. The Emperor God had actually comprehended such a terrifying martial technique from his bloodline. He was not even in the spiritual God realm. Even among the fearsome powerhouses of the spiritual God realm, there were many who had not comprehended God-level martial techniques. Buzz! Buzz! Whoosh! Countless terrifying sword chi fell on Blood Sword One's sword. The blood-red combat sword trembled violently, but in just a dozen breaths, the huge combat sword seemed to be unable to withstand it. The power of a divine-level martial technique was too strong. Break! A roar came from the blood sword, and the blood-red sword chi soared into the sky. The blood-red sword began to spin rapidly, like a drill, and rushed out of the area covered by the sword chi. Then, with a flash of blood light, it turned back into Blood Sword One. At this moment, Xue Jianyi was in a sorry state. His breath was shallow, his face was pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. I've lost. Blood Sword One sighed and admitted defeat to Dishen. With Blood Sword One's surrender, the Emperor God's aura was withdrawn. At the same time, the Fate Dragon above Blood Sword One's head had devoured 90% of the Fate Dragon. Many people in the surroundings also sighed. It wasn't that Blood Sword Yi wasn't strong enough, but that Emperor God was too strong. However, after this battle, everyone finally saw part of the Emperor God's strength. With a cultivation at the peak of the 8th level spirit embryo realm, he had grasped the space and sword concepts. Furthermore, he had comprehended a low-grade divine bloodline martial technique. Such strength was truly astonishing. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, Yan Kuangtu, Bai Qixue, Fatty, and the others all looked very serious. The Emperor God was too powerful. Could Lu Ming fight him? Chapter 973. 973 Lu Ming versus the Emperor God. Lu Ming, if you can't win, feel free to admit defeat. Your results are already enough. I believe no one will object to you becoming an official Zongzi if you come in second. Bai Shijin said to Lu Ming in a low voice. That's right, Lu Ming. Do your best. Du Songjue also warned in a low voice. Seniors, don't worry. Lu Ming knows what to do. Lu Ming smiled faintly. It seemed that no one thought that he could win. Bai Shijin and Du Songjue had said it tactfully, but the meaning was obvious. They all thought that he could not win. The feeling of being looked down upon by others was not a good feeling. Lu Ming's eyes flashed with a sharp glint. How would he know if he didn't fight? At this moment, the Emperor God also looked at Lu Ming. Then, he stepped forward and landed on the stands. There was only one last battle left, but the light of the battle did not fall on Lu Ming and the Emperor God. It was obvious that the ancient city of Providence was very humane and gave the Emperor God time to rest and recover. The Emperor God closed his eyes and regulated his breathing. Half an hour later, he opened his eyes. Buzz! Buzz! 2 rays of light fell on Lu Ming and the Emperor God. The Battle of the Peak began. Buzz! Buzz! Lu Ming and Di Shen moved almost at the same time. In a flash, they landed on the fighting ring, facing each other. Above Lu Ming's head, a 3,000-foot-long dragon of fate was suspended. Above the Emperor God's head, the dragon of fate had also reached more than 260 feet, only a few hundred feet away from Lu Ming's dragon of fate. The 2 fate dragons were facing each other. The Emperor God's eyes were calm and indifferent. He looked at Lu Ming and said, Lu Ming, you've seen my abilities. Do you think there's still a need to fight? His voice was calm, but it was filled with confidence. How do you know you're going to win if you haven't fought? Lu Ming smiled faintly. Alright, then today, I'll completely destroy your confidence. The Emperor God's eyes shone with a sharp light. Originally, I wanted to kill you today, but His Majesty told me not to kill you. So, I'll spare you today. Oh. Is that so? Lu Ming's gaze flickered. Emperor God's intention was simple. He had wanted to have a life-and-death battle with Lu Ming and kill him in one battle, but Martial Emperor De told him not to kill Lu Ming. It was obvious that Martial Emperor De wanted to capture Lu Ming alive and take his 9-dragon bloodline. Emperor God, the first place on the list of top 1,000 talents will have a new master. Lu Ming's eyes were filled with determination. Today, no matter what, Lu Ming had to win. If he could not even defeat Di Shen or De, who was a junior, how could he fight against De? Bang! 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 Lu Ming strode toward Di Shen. With every step he took, the aura on Lu Ming's body became more violent. For intense revolvered around him as his true essence circulated. His dragon power burst forth, and his skin was covered in a layer of dragon power. 1, 2, 3. Lu Ming released 3 bursts of dragon energy in one go. Slash! The Emperor God's body was filled with sword will and a vast sword power burst out. He took a step forward and approached Lu Ming at a great speed. A combat sword appeared in his hand and he slashed. Sword intent bloomed, and one after another, terrifying sword light slashed at Lu Ming. Boom! 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 Lu Ming threw more than a dozen punches in a row. With each punch, a sword gleam was shattered. After a dozen punches, more than a dozen sword gleams were shattered. Emperor God, use your full strength. You can't defeat me like this. Lu Ming shouted, the fighting spirit in his eyes growing stronger. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. The Emperor God's indifferent voice came out, and his aura became stronger. His cultivation at the peak of the 8th level of the spirit embryo realm was undoubtedly revealed. Buzz! He took a step forward and his figure seemed to be shuttling through space. In the next moment, he appeared dozens of meters away and headed toward Lu Ming at top speed. At the same time, he slashed his sword in the air. At this moment, all the hair on Lu Ming's body stood on end. A strong sense of danger rose in his heart. Buzz! In the nick of time, Lu Ming stomped his feet and retreated rapidly. As soon as Lu Ming retreated, a sword gleam slashed at the spot where he had been standing just now. It slashed the fighting ring, causing sparks to fly. Your spiritual sense is quite sharp, but I'll see how many moves you can block. The Emperor God said coldly and wielded his sword. In an instant, he slashed out dozens of times. Lu Ming's sense of danger grew stronger. Without any hesitation, he started to run wildly on the fighting ring. Whoosh! 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 Wherever Lu Ming ran past, there would be sword gleams slashing out. Every sword almost cut Lu Ming. Only running. But in front of me, you don't even have the right to run. The Emperor God snorted coldly and stomped. His figure appeared on the fighting ring like a phantom, as if he was traveling through the void. In a few breaths, he was close to Lu Ming. The combat sword slashed out and countless sword gleams appeared around Lu Ming, blocking all his escape routes. Since I can't dodge, I'll use my strength to blow it up. Lu Ming's eyes gleamed with ferocity. The last 3 dragon energies in his body exploded. There were a total of 6 dragon energies, and Lu Ming used all of them. His strength increased rapidly. Lu Ming threw dozens of punches in all directions. Boom! 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 All the sword lights around him shattered. However, Lu Ming did not stop. He continued to throw punches. With every punch, a terrifying power exploded, completely distorting and compressing the space. The Emperor God's sword light was crushed before it could leave the space. The Emperor God's eyes turned cold. He kept swinging his combat sword while Lu Ming's fist kept punching the air. Every time it struck, it shattered the Emperor God's sword light. Ha, Lu Ming, this move is not bad. Yan Kuangtu laughed. Although the Emperor God's sword can travel through the void and change unpredictably, there will definitely be fluctuations in the space when the sword light is about to be slashed. As long as Lu Ming senses the fluctuations, he will bombard the space with powerful fist force and distort it. Then, the Emperor God's sword light will not be able to be slashed. Supreme Master Nine Sons nodded in agreement. Many big shots nodded to themselves as they understood what was going on, but they were also secretly shocked. It wasn't difficult to sense the spatial fluctuations, but the key was to block them. That was the difficult part. Lu Ming's every punch was terrifyingly powerful. They discovered that the power that Lu Ming was displaying now was stronger than when he was fighting AO2. When Lu Ming was fighting with AO2 just now, he had actually concealed his strength. This shocked them. Humph. Your strength is not bad, so I'll defeat you face to face. The Emperor God snorted coldly. He stopped drawing his sword. He took a step forward and his figure was like a flickering light and a fleeting shadow. He was unbelievably fast and approached Lu Ming in an instant. Having comprehended the space concept, his speed was equally terrifying. Lu Ming realized that even if he used the 9 dragons' heaven-treading steps, he would still be slower. As he approached Lu Ming, a terrible sword power burst out of the Emperor God's body. The mighty sword power pressed down on Lu Ming, and the terrible sword light slashed at Lu Ming. The void was distorted and even cracked. The power of this sword was extremely terrifying. The combination of the space and sword mentality made the power of the sword reach its peak. Even if Lu Ming wanted to retreat, he had no way out. If he retreated, he would face an even more violent attack from the Emperor God. The only way was to face them head-on. Chapter 974. 974 Chapter 974 Difficult Battle. A crazed look appeared in Lu Ming's eyes. He circulated his essential core frantically and pushed the prison-suppressing heaven technique to 50% of its power. Then, he threw a punch. Boom! The fist and the sword chi collided, creating a terrifying boom. The endless sword chi scattered in all directions, as did the fist radiance. However, they were blocked by an invisible force at the edge of the fighting ring and disappeared. Bang! 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 Lu Ming took 3 consecutive steps back, his chi and blood surging. That's right. Then, take another strike of mine. Tiangang Emperor's Sword. The Emperor God let out a long roar and slashed down again. As he swung his sword, endless sword light burst forth, carrying with it the intention to cut through space, slashing toward Lu Ming. It was the Tiangang Emperor's Sword, a low-grade divine bloodline martial technique. Dishan had used this move to defeat Blood Sword 1. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the fighting ring. They wanted to see how Lu Ming would resist this move. A dragon's roar was heard and 9 dragons appeared. Lu Ming transformed into 9 dragons. Boom! 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 The 9 claws of the 9 dragons continued to grab at it, pushing the prison-suppressing heaven technique to 60%. The sound of explosions continued to ring out. Most of the sword light was blocked, but there were still a few that were not blocked. They landed on the 9 dragons, and their scales were instantly cut open. Deep wounds appeared on the 9 dragons' bodies, and blood flowed out. But in the end, it was still blocked by Lu Ming. He can actually block the divine-level martial technique of the Emperor God. Could it be that Lu Ming is also using a divine-level martial technique? Someone exclaimed in disbelief. Even Blood Sword 1 was defeated by this move. It was unbelievable that Lu Ming could block it. It's definitely a god-tier martial technique. There's no mistake. A supreme martial artist said. Everyone was in disbelief. Lu Ming had also mastered a divine-level martial arts technique. It was too shocking. The situation is not good for Lu Ming. Although he has also mastered the divine-level martial technique, with his cultivation, he can't exert the full power of the divine-level martial technique at all. However, the Emperor God's cultivation is stronger, and the power of the divine-level martial technique is stronger. Yan Kuangtu said worriedly. The others didn't say anything, but their expressions were grave. On the battle stage, the Emperor God's eyes shone with a shocking, sharp, and terrifying light. His voice was no longer indifferent, but also full of sharpness. Lu Ming, I didn't expect you to be able to take this move of mine. You're not bad. Let's see how you're going to take it next. Tiangang Emperor's Sword, 1 sword to conquer the world. The Emperor God's entire body seemed to turn golden like a golden sun. He slashed out with the combat sword in his hand. The space in all directions was distorted and finally cracked. It was brought along by the Emperor God's sword light and wrapped together as it slashed toward Lu Ming. It was reasonable to say that only spiritual god masters could cut open space. However, there was obviously a gap between an emperor god and a spiritual god, but he could cut open space. This did not mean that his combat strength had reached the level of a spiritual god, but it was because of his space concept. Driven by the concept of space, it cut through the space and charged toward Lu Ming with the power of space cutting. Space twisted, and sword light was everywhere. Lu Ming fought back with all his might. His dragon claws kept striking out and his dragon tail lashed out like a divine whip. However, there were too many sword lights in the surroundings, and their power was too strong. Given Lu Ming's abilities, he could not block all of them. The extremely sharp sword chi swam around Lu Ming's body, cutting open wounds on his body. Lu Ming did not care about his injuries. He fought back with all his might and fought the Emperor God. Refine, refine. At the same time, Lu Ming was constantly refining the energy of the origin stone to break through to the next realm. He had already secretly ordered 9 dragons to swallow more than 200,000 raw stones. He wanted to fight while breaking through to the next realm. He felt that he was about to reach the 8th level spirit embryo realm soon. The Emperor God was too powerful. If Lu Ming did not make a breakthrough in his realm, it would be difficult to defeat him. The Emperor God's 2 intents were level 4 sword intent and level 3 space intent. The fusion of the 2 intents was not any weaker than Lu Ming's 4 intents. Moreover, the Emperor God also mastered a divine level martial technique and cultivated a divine level cultivation technique. It was an extremely powerful divine level cultivation technique and his vital essence was extremely rich. Lu Ming did not have any advantage in all these. Lu Ming had the support of the dragon power, but he felt that the Emperor God was also supported by a mysterious power, which was extremely powerful and unstoppable. Lu Ming did not have the advantage in any of these aspects. In terms of cultivation, Lu Ming was at a disadvantage. Lu Ming did his best and fought dozens of moves with the Emperor God. At this moment, the scales on the 9 dragons' bodies had cracked and fallen off. They were covered with sword marks and blood was flowing out. It was a terrible sight. Lu Ming. Bai Qixue clenched her fists and her eyes were filled with a layer of mist. She was extremely worried. Fatty, Wan Tingting, and the others did not say anything. They stared at the fighting ring and were extremely worried. However, the people from the Empyrean Heavenly Divine Palace, the Heavenly Demon Valley, and the Heavenly Corpse sect were gloating. Lu Ming is going to lose. He's no match for the Emperor God. What is he waiting for if he doesn't admit defeat? He's just fighting to the death. I knew he couldn't be a match for the Emperor God. I think Lu Ming will be defeated within 10 moves. Voices came from all around. It's a pity that this is not a life and death battle. Lu Ming can admit defeat at any time. However, since he has offended His Majesty, Martial Emperor De, he will die sooner or later. The patriarch of the Wang clan thought to himself. At this moment, the Emperor God's aura grew stronger and stronger. Every slash of his sword was filled with shocking sword qi. Space and sword intent combined to suppress Lu Ming. More and more wounds appeared on the 9 dragons' bodies. Refine, refine. Break. Lu Ming roared in his heart and the essential core in his body was boiling. Suddenly, a powerful aura burst out of the 9 dragons. What? Cultivation breakthrough? How is that possible? He's actually breaking through at this time. Impossible. Voices of disbelief rang out one after another. On the grandstand, the big shots shouted in disbelief and stood up. How was it possible that Lu Ming had a breakthrough in his cultivation during the battle with the Emperor God? Unbelievable. Ha, this kid always exceeds my expectations. He has my style. Fatty grinned and was extremely excited. Yan Kuangtu, Bai Shijin, and the others also revealed excited expressions. Lu Ming's move was beyond their expectations. Damn it. The Emperor God's eyes were no longer calm, and they were filled with anger and killing intent. Lu Ming had actually broken through in the middle of a great battle with him. This was a blatant humiliation to him. He was looking down on him and was using him to break through. At that moment, the Emperor God's body burst out with a strong killing intent. The bloodline of the 9 dragons is indeed amazing. A faint voice was heard. The person who spoke was Martial Emperor De. Everyone's heart trembled, and then they came to a realization. It was not that Lu Ming was too heaven-defying. It was because of his 9-dragon bloodline that he was able to break through during the great battle. The Emperor God's heart also calmed down, but the light in his eyes became colder. Yan Kuangtu, Bai Shijin, and the others secretly scolded De for being a cunning old fox. With one sentence, he pushed the shock caused by Lu Ming to the 9-dragon bloodline, calming Di Shin's shocked heart. An emperor god who had calmed down was the most terrifying. Chapter 975. 975 Peak Confrontation, using all trump cards. Roar. Dragon roars shook the sky as the 9 dragons clawed out several times. The emperor god's sword light was shattered. Now, the real battle has only just begun. The 9 dragons' eyes revealed a strong desire to fight, as well as a fierce look. The scales that had fallen off his body and the bloody wounds on his body that had been injured by the sword chi were healing at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. A fierce and powerful aura was constantly emitted from the 9 dragons. Slowly, their momentum actually suppressed the emperor god. Buzz! The sound of a sword ringing resounded throughout the ancient city of Providence. A golden combat sword appeared above the emperor god's head. As soon as the sword appeared, it attracted everyone's attention. The golden battle sword was filled with a noble aura. A golden dragon circled around the hilt, looking extremely majestic. It was like the Emperor of Swords, its might suppressing the universe. The Emperor's sword was a bloodline that could only be passed down by the direct descendants of Di Yi's martial emperor bloodline. This was the second time Lu Ming had seen the Emperor's sword bloodline. He had seen it on Di Feng and now on Di Shen. Back then, Di Feng was only a level 4 divine level expert. However, the 8 dazzling golden chakras of God Emperor made countless people's eyes widen. Divine level rank 8. Another divine level rank 8 bloodline had appeared. Previously, it was Fatty who entered empty space. Now, it was Emperor God. Nest, this guy's bloodline is the same level as mine. How is this possible? I'm 10,000 times more handsome than this guy. The fatty shouted unhappily. Only this guy could still call out. The others' eyes were very serious. The Emperor God's figure flashed and disappeared into the Emperor's sword. The Emperor trembled, and the vast sword power burst out madly, pressing toward Lu Ming. Bang! Lu Ming waved his claws and broke the vast sword force. Everyone's hearts were in their throats. They held their breath and stared at the fighting ring. They knew that the final battle was about to begin. It was beyond everyone's expectations that this battle could reach this stage. Lu Ming had actually broken through his cultivation in the middle of the battle. His combat strength had improved greatly and he had forced the Emperor God to perform the blood fusion. This battle, who would win and who would lose, was beginning to be filled with suspense. World-slaying sword. A cold voice was heard from the Emperor's sword. The Emperor's sword shook and endless golden light was emitted. The golden light was actually sword chi. Endless sword chi appeared around the Emperor's sword like a pair of sword chi wings. Whoosh! 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 In the next moment, endless sword chi shot toward the 9 dragons. Each sword chi was extremely terrifying and covered every inch of the 9 dragons. The 9 dragons roared and stomped with their 9 claws, performing the 9 dragons' heaven-treading steps. The void trembled and violent energy exploded, destroying all the sword chi. The 9 dragons twisted their bodies and pounced toward the Emperor's sword in the air. The Emperor's sword trembled and slashed at the 9 dragons with a terrifying sword intent. A dragon and a sword were fighting on the fighting ring. The roar of the sword and the cry of the dragon resounded through the world. On the fighting ring, the roar continued as the two began a fierce battle. It was difficult to determine the winner. For a moment, the two were in a stalemate and fought for hundreds of moves. More than 20 minutes had passed, and the winner had yet to be determined. According to the rules, once the battle had been going on for 30 minutes and the victor had not been decided, the ancient city of Providence would automatically determine the winner as the person who had the upper hand. But now, the two seemed to be tied. Everyone held their breath and stared at the fighting ring. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly for fear of disturbing the two people in the fighting ring. Not to mention the younger generation, even the older generation, spirit gods, and even supreme masters had never seen such a battle in their thousands of years of life. Each of these people had the potential to become a martial royal realm expert in the future. They were all rare existences that only appeared once in 100 years or even 1,000 years. If they appeared, they would be characters that could suppress an era. It was too rare for two such people to appear in the same era. 100 years ago, Yan Kuangtu had appeared out of nowhere. No one in the younger generation of the Eastern Barren Territory could defeat him. He had swept away all the strong cultivators and reached the peak. Thousands of years ago, when the Supreme Nine Sons appeared, it was the same. He was invincible. However, this generation was different. There were so many geniuses and experts that they could even rival the Emperor gods. The two of them fought intensely. In the end, after an intense collision in the air, they both retreated. Buzz! The Emperor's sword trembled and actually collapsed, returning to its human form. The crowd was shocked. Was the Emperor God going to be defeated? However, the 9 dragons' bodies glowed and dispersed immediately after, turning back into Lu Ming's appearance. The power of their bloodline seemed to have been exhausted at the same time. Lu Ming, I have to admit that you're very strong. You're the first person who has forced me to this extent. But this is it. It's time to end this. The Emperor God's eyes were filled with killing intent. A powerful aura suddenly burst out of his body, and golden flames spread out from his body. The Emperor God's aura became even more terrifying than before. Intent Realm, another kind of Intent Realm. This Intent Realm was very similar to the Fire Intent Realm. It was called the Golden Flame Intent Realm. The Emperor God had comprehended 3 intents. It seemed that his Golden Flame intent had reached the 4th level and had successfully merged with the other 2 intents. It was unbelievable that the Emperor God was still hiding his strength. Everyone was dumbfounded. Not good. Yan Kuangtu, Bai Shijin, and the others' expressions changed drastically. They had never expected the Emperor God to have such a trick up his sleeve. It seems that the Emperor God won in the end. Someone sighed. Lu Ming is just a stepping stone for the Emperor God. The patriarch of the Wang clan snorted coldly. The more powerful Lu Ming was, the more unhappy he was. Lu Ming, I was planning to preserve some of my strength so that I could compete with the prodigies of the Central Continent and the other 3 regions in the future. Now, I'll let you have a taste. Whoosh! The Emperor God turned into a golden sword and slashed at Lu Ming. The Emperor God's heart was higher than the sky. His vision was no longer limited to the Eastern Barren Territory. He wanted to compete with the paragons of the Southern Underworld, Northern Plains, Western Desert, and even the Central Continent. Thus, he had been holding back. Do you think I don't have the means to do so? At this moment, Lu Ming was not panicking. Instead, he appeared very calm. There was even a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. Buzz! Inscriptions appeared on his body, and a battle of inscriptions appeared. All of them were support-type formations. Some increased speed, some increased defense, and some burst true energy. There were more than 10 arrays in total, causing Lu Ming's aura to soar. Bang! At the same time, Lu Ming took a step forward. Countless inscriptions appeared on the entire fighting ring and even in the air. A huge array emerged. This. Everyone was dumbfounded. Lu Ming had actually been secretly inscribing inscriptions during the previous battle. After more than 20 minutes of fighting, Lu Ming had inscribed a huge array. This point had been hidden from everyone. As Lu Ming had been using martial arts to fight his enemies, he had displayed unbelievably strong combat power in martial arts. This had caused everyone to overlook one thing: not only was Lu Ming a martial arts powerhouse, but his Tao of inscription was also not weak. Chapter 976. 976 First place, stepping onto the peak. At this moment, Lu Ming's sudden outburst reminded the others that Lu Ming not only cultivated martial arts but also the Tao of inscription. Emperor God, you're the one who's defeated this time. Die! Lu Ming roared. He took a step forward and rushed toward Dishan like the wind. At the same time, the formation on the fighting ring glowed. Long spears were formed one after another, emitting a terrifying aura. They pierced toward the Emperor God. In the previous battle with the Emperor God, although it was impossible to concentrate on carving the formation, how could it be weak after spending more than 20 minutes in the battle? In addition, with the various supplementary arrays, Lu Ming's combat strength had increased greatly. The Emperor God's eyes were extremely gloomy. He kept slashing out his sword, clashing with the long spear formed by the formation. Bang! Bang! Lu Ming stepped forward and struck the Emperor God's sword with his palm. The Emperor God trembled and retreated. Lu Ming strode forward and kept launching attacks. At the same time, the formation glowed and kept condensing long spears to attack the Emperor God. The Emperor God couldn't fight back and kept retreating. He was at a disadvantage. He had unleashed 3 types of concepts and his attack power was unparalleled. However, he was still no match for Lu Ming. Most importantly, his will of space was still at the complete stage of level 3, while the other 2 had reached level 4. It was difficult for him to unleash the full power of his will. He roared and fought with all his might, but he was still at a disadvantage. I'll let you have a taste of the prison-suppressing steel. The prison-suppressing steel appeared above Lu Ming's head. Lu Ming transformed into the prison-suppressing steel and suppressed the Emperor God. The bloodline power of the 9 dragons had been used up, but the bloodline power of the prison-suppressing steel was still there. The crowd was numb. Many people already knew that Lu Ming had 2 divine-level bloodlines, so they were not too shocked. Bang! The Emperor God was hit by the prison-suppressing steel. His body trembled and he was knocked back. His face turned pale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Suppress! The prison-suppressing steel glowed and continued to suppress the Emperor God. The Emperor God's face was gloomy. He took a step forward and disappeared in an instant, reappearing in another place 100 meters away. The prison-suppressing steel shook and continued to press down on the Emperor God. The Emperor God did not dare to take the attack head-on. He could only continue to use teleport, his figure constantly changing to avoid Lu Ming's attacks. This scene caused the expressions of the people from the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace to turn extremely ugly. In this way, the Emperor God was at a disadvantage. Once half an hour was up, the ancient city of Providence would automatically determine that the Emperor God had failed. Of course, this was still better than admitting defeat. If he admitted defeat, he would lose 90% of his fate value, while if he lost, he would only lose half of his fate value. Martial Emperor Di Yi's face darkened. The destiny that he obtained in every battle of destiny was very important to him. However, it seemed like he was going to fail this time. The first place might fall to Lu Ming and the Talisman Amulet sect. God Emperor, weren't you very arrogant just now? Now you can only run away. Is this the number 1 on the list of top 1,000 talents? Lu Ming sneered and mocked. The Emperor God gritted his teeth, and the flames of anger in his eyes seemed to be burning. Lu Ming, I'll definitely kill you with my own hands in the future. Di Yi's cold voice was heard. Ha, Di Shen, let me tell you. You've lost to me today, but you'll never be my match in the future. Lu Ming laughed heartily. The Emperor God clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. He was greatly shocked. This was because he had always been the one saying this to others in the past. In the past, he was ranked first on the list of top 1,000 talents. He was high and mighty with unparalleled talent. Anyone who was defeated by him would never be his opponent in the future, because he improved faster than others and the gap between him and the others would only grow wider. He had never thought that these words would come from someone else's mouth, and that the target would be him. However, he was helpless now. The power of his blood meridian had been exhausted and he could not block Lu Ming's attack at all. He could only use blink to dodge. Time passed quickly. Buzz! Suddenly, the fighting ring shook and two beams of light enveloped Lu Ming and the Emperor God. The time was up, and the two of them fought for a full half an hour. When the time was up, the battle ended. The prison-suppressing steel shrunk rapidly and transformed into Lu Ming's appearance. Roar! The fate dragon above Lu Ming's head roared and gnawed at the fate dragon above Dishan's head. In the end, it devoured half of Dishan's fate. The Emperor God's fate was now more than 1,300 feet. On the other hand, Lu Ming's fate dragon expanded rapidly and finally exceeded 4,000 feet. The fate dragon, which was more than 4,000 feet long, floated above Lu Ming's head, just like a real dragon. Lu Ming won. Ha! Lu Ming is in first place. Fatty was the first to shout out in excitement. Lu Ming is first. Then, Bai Qixua, Wan Tingting, and the others also started to shout and cheer. Even Huan Zhen, Wen Zhisher, and the others were extremely excited. I didn't expect Lu Ming to be so powerful. I'm not as good as him. Huan Zhen sighed, but he didn't look unhappy. Instead, his eyes were filled with joy. We were competing with Lu Ming before this. Ji Mai, Meng Jia, and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They felt a vague sense of pride in their hearts. They had been Lu Ming's opponents. At this moment, even Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, Meng Chong, and the others were extremely excited. Lu Ming had won first place and his fate dragon was more than 4,000 feet long. How shocking was this? There was no doubt that the Talisman sect was ranked first in the overall ranking of this battle of destiny. How many years had it been? Ever since Lien Song's disappearance, the Talisman sect had been on a decline. They had never gotten first place before, but now they had gotten first place again. This time, the Talisman Amulet sect would definitely obtain great fortune. Perhaps, there was hope for its revival. How could they not be excited? In the past, the condition that they put forward to Lu Ming was for him to win first place in the Battle of Providence. However, in their hearts, no one actually thought that Lu Ming could do it. They were just giving him pressure. They did not expect that Lu Ming could really do it. As for the people from the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace, the Heavenly Corpse sect, and the Sky Demon Valley, they all had different expressions. But most of them were shocked. Before the Battle of Providence started, who would have guessed that Lu Ming would actually get first place? At that time, both the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace and the Heavenly Demon Valley wanted to kill Lu Ming. Most of them thought that Lu Ming was dead for sure. However, Lu Ming created a miracle later on and even defeated the Emperor God to win the first place. Damn it, how did this happen? The masters of the Wang and Jiang families were filled with killing intent as they roared in their hearts. Martial Emperor De didn't say a word, but his eyes shot out a cold light. Hee hee, this little guy is really unexpected. In the Sky Demon Valley, the Demon Emperor's charming voice made many people's hearts beat faster. It's indeed unexpected. The Corpse Emperor's ear-piercing voice was the complete opposite of the Demon Emperor's. The eyes of Ao2, Shuejiani, Feng Xian, and the others were filled with a shocking fighting spirit. They knew that from now on, they would have a powerful opponent on their way to rise. This opponent gave them immense pressure. At this moment, the light pillar that enveloped Lu Ming suddenly shone brightly. Then, a token appeared out of nowhere and descended from the sky, flying toward Lu Ming. Chapter 977. 977 Mixed Essence Token. A token suddenly appeared above the light pillar and flew toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming instinctively caught it. Mixed energy token. It's a mixed energy token. A cry of surprise came from the direction of the Sky Demon Valley, and it was the Demon Emperor. What matter could actually make a generation's Demon Emperor cry out in alarm? Bang! Bang! Then, the Corpse Emperor and Martial Emperor De stood up from their seats, with a terrifying light shooting out of their eyes. Many of the older generation seemed to have thought of something. His eyes were filled with shock. And many of the younger generation looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. What was a mixed essence token? How could he make the three emperors lose their composure? Lu Ming was extremely curious. He looked at the token in his hand. The token was purple gold in color and was cast from an unknown material. 2 words were written on it: Primordial Chaos. Congratulations on passing the initial test. Suddenly, a voice rang in Lu Ming's mind. This voice was directly heard in Lu Ming's mind. No one else could hear it. Who is it? Who are you? Lu Ming shouted in his heart. However, there was no response. Lu Ming continued to call, but there was still no reply. Lu Ming was extremely curious. What did that voice mean? After passing the initial test, could there be another test? Roar! At that moment, the true dragon of providence above Lu Ming's head roared and shrank rapidly, turning into a beam of light and entering Lu Ming's body, disappearing. At the same time, the serpents, dragons, and true dragons above the young heaven's favorites' heads all turned into beams of light and entered their bodies. At this moment, the ancient city of Providence trembled and burst out with a dazzling light. Some of them flew toward the people of the Sky Demon Valley. One of them entered the Demon Emperor's body. The Demon Emperor obtained the most. Another portion flew toward the Heavenly Corpse sect and landed on their disciples. Similarly, the Corpse Emperor obtained the most portion. The other portion, which was even brighter than the light from the Heavenly Corpse sect and the Sky Demon Valley, flew toward the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. De and Martial Emperor received the largest portion. However, the largest portion flew towards the Talisman Amulet sect. The Talisman sect's disciples, Bai Shijin, the 2 sect leaders of Du Songjue, the various elders, the 9 Sons Supreme, Yan Kuangtu, and so on, all received a big ball of light. Even Elder Yun of the Talisman Amulet sect had obtained more light than the Corpse Emperor or the Demon Emperor. The 9 Sons Supreme, Bai Shijin, and Du Songjue had received more light than Martial Emperor De. The people from the other 3 factions looked at the Talisman Amulet sect with envy. This light was the legendary luck, which was extremely mysterious. At this moment, if one were to look from the outside of the ancient city of Providence, one would be able to see that the entire ancient city of Providence was glowing. Beams of light flew in all directions towards the eastern wilderness. Among them, the lights that flew towards the Talisman sect were the largest and most numerous. The speed of the light was unparalleled. It crossed layers of space in an instant and flew to the Talisman sect. At this moment, countless Talisman Amulet sect disciples were being nourished by the light. Some of them had encountered a bottleneck in their cultivation and had been stuck in a realm for many years. However, when this ray of light rushed through them, they actually broke through the bottleneck and broke through to a new realm. As for Lu Ming's parents, Lu Yuntian, Li Ping, and the rest of the Lu family, they were also shrouded in a large amount of light. Those who were close to Lu Ming would receive a lot of light. Countless people were stunned and confused. The Talisman sect members in the ancient city of Providence were ecstatic. This was the legendary blessing with luck, which was infinitely mysterious. I don't know what benefits there are. I'll go back and experience it. Lu Ming muttered. He felt that he was in high spirits and his thoughts were extremely clear. He could not feel anything else. Lu Ming took a step forward and returned to the Talisman sect's area. It was time to leave. The battle of karmic luck had ended. Lu Ming had finally achieved what he wanted to do. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue. Suddenly, a majestic voice was heard. Everyone was shocked because the voice came from Martial Emperor De. Everyone looked at Martial Emperor De. Bai Shijin and Du Songjue's expressions changed slightly, and they also looked at Martial Emperor De. Martial Emperor De's face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He stared at Bai Shijin and Du Songjue and said, "You should know that Lu Ming is the person I want. Now, Lu Ming has helped your talisman amulet sect to win first place in the Battle of Providence. You have also benefited from it. Now, hand him over to me." His voice was filled with a sense of superiority and unquestionable authority. It was as if the other party had to do as he said. In fact, in the East Continent, not many people dared to refute the words of Martial Emperor De. Everyone was shocked. De was going to make trouble for the talisman sect. How should they deal with this? Should they hand Lu Ming over or not? At this moment, everyone's eyes were on Bai Shijin and Du Songjue. Bai Shijin and Du Songjue's faces darkened. De, Martial Emperor, you said it yourself. Lu Ming helped my talisman amulet sect in the Battle of Providence and obtain great fortune. Do you think I, Bai Shijin, am an ungrateful person? Bai Shijin looked at De and said slowly. I, Du Song, have lived for thousands of years. I still have a bottom line. There is no room for discussion on this matter. Du Songjue spoke. The two sect leaders of the talisman sect rejected De one after another. Martial Emperor De frowned slightly. Two bright lights shot out of his eyes, and an unparalleled majesty spread out. You have to consider carefully. Is it worth it to sacrifice the entire talisman amulet sect for Lu Ming? Martial Emperor De spoke slowly, but it shocked everyone. Was Martial Emperor De going to attack the talisman amulet sect? In the past, the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace had only slowly encroached on the territory of the talisman amulet sect. Martial Emperor De had never personally attacked the talisman amulet sect. Was he going to do it himself now? This was definitely a big event that would shake the Eastern Barren Territory and affect the future of the Eastern Barren Territory. Perhaps in the future, there would only be 3 overlords in the East Continent, not 4. I'll keep you company. Du Songjue responded strongly. De, I don't mind telling you that Lu Ming is the Zongzi of the talisman sect. So, if Lu Ming is here, the talisman sect will die. Bai Shijin said. Everyone was shocked by his words. Lu Ming was actually the Zongzi of the talisman amulet sect. What did it mean to be a Zongzi? It meant that he was the future sect master of the talisman amulet sect. He was the person who would take over as the sect master of the talisman amulet sect. However, how could Lu Ming become the Zongzi of the talisman amulet sect? Even though he had won first place in the Battle of Providence. As Lu Ming had always been cultivating in the territory of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace, it had not been long since he went to the talisman amulet sect. Lu Ming is the Zongzi of your talisman amulet sect. Martial Emperor De frowned even more, and his eyes became colder. That's right. De, listen well. Lu Ming is not only the Zongzi of the talisman sect, but he is also the inheritor of Grandmaster Liaozang. Bai Shijin said, word for word. Chapter 978. 978 De's threat. As soon as he said that, it was as if a bomb had been dropped, and the entire audience was in an uproar. What? How is it possible that Lu Ming is the successor of Emperor Tsang? Emperor Tsang has disappeared for 3,000 years. Rumor has it that he died while wandering overseas. How could Lu Ming be the successor of Emperor Tsang? Could it be that Emperor Liaozang is still alive? Everyone was in shock. Someone even suggested that Lien Tsang was still alive, which shocked everyone. Emperor Liaozong was the #1 alchemist in the Eastern Barren Territory. His art of inscription was unparalleled. If he was still alive, it would be earth-shaking news. The situation of the entire Eastern Barren Territory would change dramatically. Martial Emperor Di Yi's eyes lit up like two divine swords, piercing the sky. His body was filled with a powerful killing intent. Lu Ming, you are Lian Sung's disciple. Martial Emperor Di Yi spoke word by word, staring at Lu Ming with an extremely cold gaze. Lu Ming looked at Martial Emperor Di Yi fearlessly. His hand glowed and a scroll appeared in his hand. He said, Di Yi, look at this. Martial Emperor Di Yi's eyes fell on the scroll in Lu Ming's hand. He said coldly, the all-formation illustration, it seems like you have really received Lian Song's inheritance. Everyone's eyes fell on the million formation illustration, and their hearts trembled. The all-array diagram was the most powerful treasure of Emperor Liaozong. Since Lu Ming had the all-array diagram, he must be Liaozong's successor. The ones who were the most shocked were the elders and disciples of the Talisman sect. They stared at the Myriad array diagram in Lu Ming's hands in a daze. Their eyes were filled with excitement and disbelief. All-array diagram. Huan Zhen, Wen Zhongyi, Bai Qixue, Ji Mai, and the rest were all excited. Then, they came to a realization. They finally knew why the patriarchs of the Talisman Amulet sect had chosen Lu Ming as a Zongzi candidate. It was because he was the inheritor of the divine cultivator Song. Ma. Master, is Grandmaster Lian Song still alive? Bai Qixue asked Bai Shijin with a trembling voice. Grandmaster Lian Song won't be coming back. Bai Shijin sighed. Bai Shijin then looked at Martial Emperor Di Yi again and said, Di Yi, Lu Ming is the successor of Grandmaster Liaozong. He is the Zongzi of the Talisman Amulet sect. You have harmed Grandmaster Liaozong. Is it possible for us to hand Lu Ming over to you? Boom. 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 His words were even more shocking. It was like a thunderclap that resounded in everyone's mind. Emperor Liaozong was actually killed by Martial Emperor Di Yi. At this moment, not only were the people of the Talisman Amulet sect shocked, but the disciples, elders, and even supremes of the other three sects, the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace, the Sky Demon Valley, and the Heavenly Corpse sect, were also shocked. In the past, almost everyone believed that Emperor Liaozong had died while adventuring overseas. This was because in the Divine Wilderness continent, it was extremely difficult to advance after reaching the martial royal realm. To a sovereign realm expert, the Divine Wilderness continent was too small and the environment was too poor. It was not suitable for cultivation. If he wanted to continue improving, he would have to head overseas and search for a bigger continent with better conditions to cultivate on. In history, there were many emperors who went overseas to cultivate and risk their lives, but they ended up dying overseas. Everyone thought that Emperor Liaozong had died overseas because of this. He had never expected that Martial Emperor Di Yi had secretly harmed him. In this case, the Talisman sect and Martial Emperor Di Yi were mortal enemies. How could they hand Lu Ming over to Di Yi? Di Yi, did you really kill Lian Song? You're so scheming, what do you want to do? The Demon Emperor of Sky Demon Valley stood up and stared at Di Yi with hostility. Corpse Chi rolled around the Corpse Emperor, but he didn't say anything. Demon Emperor, you're being too nosy. Why do I need to explain anything to you? Martial Emperor Di Yi glanced at the Demon Emperor coldly. He was extremely domineering and did not give the Demon Emperor any face at all. Then, he turned to look at Lu Ming, then at Bai Shijin and the rest. Since that's the case, the Symbol Puppet sect shall be destroyed. With that, Di Yi turned around and strode away. He stepped into the teleportation vortex and disappeared. Lu Ming, I'll let you live for the time being, but let's see how long you can live for. The master of the Wang family glared at Lu Ming coldly and turned to leave. At this moment, a figure flew out from the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace and into the Talisman Amulet sect's territory. It was Wang Haoxian. Evil creature, what are you doing? Get back here. Shut up. The master of the Wang family shouted. If I go back to the Wang family, I'll definitely be in a miserable state. Why should I go back with you? Wang Haoxian's face darkened. Even if she were to die, she would never return to the Wang family. She knew very well that if she were to return to the Wang family this time, she would definitely be in a miserable state. Lu Ming took a few steps forward to Wang Haoxian's side and said, "There's no need to go back, come with me to the Talisman Amulet sect." Evil creature. You dare to betray the family? The patriarch of the Wang clan berated. Ha ha ha, Wang Xingtian, this girl will not have a good ending if she goes back. Only an idiot would go back with you. Yan Kuangtu laughed and said, my brother is really something. He even managed to seduce the heaven's favorite of your Wang clan. Wang Xingtian, do you feel good now? Ha! Damn it! The patriarch of the Wang clan roared. His face was flushed red and he almost vomited blood. Evil creature, you dare to betray the family. Sooner or later, I'll make you suffer a fate worse than death. Let's see who can protect you. Shut up. The master of the Wang family shouted. He no longer had the face to stay and strode away, stepping into the teleportation vortex. Let's go, we're also going back. Bai Shijin and the others shouted. Immediately, everyone from the Talisman Amulet sect stepped into the teleportation vortex and returned to the sect. The people of the Heavenly Corpse sect and the Heavenly Demon Valley had also left. The Battle of Providence had finally come to an end. Lu Ming stepped into the vortex. There was a flash of light and he was back at the entrance of the Talisman Amulet sect. As soon as he returned to the Talisman Amulet sect, Lu Ming took to the air. As expected, he saw a group of people not far away. Lu Ming was overjoyed and immediately flew over. Father, mother! Lu Ming shouted. Lu Ming's parents, Lu Yuntian, and Li Ping were among the crowd. There was also Lin Shui, the sect leader of the mystical sword sect, as well as some elders and disciples. There were also Hua Qi, Pang Shi, and the rest. Lu Ming's two in-name disciples, Zhuang Shaoshan and Zhuang Xiaoro, were also there. Previously, Lu Ming had secretly passed the mountain and river diagram to Bai Shijin to ask for his help to head to the Blazing Sun Empire and bring his parents and some close friends to the Talisman Amulet sect. He knew that after the Battle of Providence, Martial Emperor De would most likely attack him and not let him off. It was too dangerous for his family and friends to be in the territory of the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. Lu Ming could only be at ease if he brought them to the Talisman Amulet sect. The Supreme Being was rushing at full speed, and his speed was terrifying. It only took him 1 or 2 hours to pick up the person. Now, Lu Ming was finally at ease. Buzz! Before Lu Ming arrived, a figure rushed toward him and landed on his shoulder. It was Dandan. Just now, luck was on your side. Lu Ming, I saw that your parents got the most. Lu Ming, what rank did you get? Dandan asked. Lu Ming got first place. Behind him, Bai Shijing, Yan Kuangtu, and the rest stepped into the air and answered on Lu Ming's behalf. As expected, not bad, kid. You have some of my style back in the day. Dandan said proudly. Chapter 979. 979 The benefits of having luck attached to one's body. At this moment, Lu Yuntian, Li Ping, and the others also saw Lu Ming and surrounded him. Father, mother, you've worked hard. Lu Ming said. Then, he greeted Lin Shui, Hua Qi, and the others. Disciple greets master. Zhuang Shaoshan and Zhuang Xiaoro knelt down to pay their respects to Lu Ming. Stand up and let me see your cultivation. Lu Ming raised his hands slightly and the siblings were lifted up by a force. Yes, I've broken through to the Martial King realm. Not bad. Lu Ming took a quick glance and realized that both of them had reached the Martial King realm. On the side, many people were also sizing up Zhuang Xiaoshan and Zhuang Xiaoro curiously. They did not expect that the two young men and women were actually Lu Ming's disciples. After that, the two siblings bowed to Lu Yuntian and Li Ping. The two elders quickly helped the two of them up and were overjoyed. Since he was Lu Ming's disciple, they naturally treated him as their own child. Father, mother, let's talk as we walk. We'll also arrange a place for you to stay. Lu Ming waved his hand, and a majestic true essence spread out. A cloud seemed to have appeared under Lu Yuntian and the others' feet, lifting them off the ground and flying forward. There were thousands of people. They were all lifted up by Lu Ming's essential core and flew in the air. Lin Shui and the rest were shocked. They knew that Lu Ming's current realm had exceeded their imagination and had reached a terrifying level. The group of people chatted as they flew, and their speed was not very fast. As for Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the other elders, they had already gone ahead to arrange accommodation for Lu Yuntian and the others as well as to make other preparations. On the way, Lu Yuntian, Lin Shui, Hua Qi, and the others also learned that Lu Ming had won first place in the Battle of Providence. Although they did not know what the War of Providence was, they were still shocked and they heard that Lu Ming had suppressed the younger generation of the East Baron and stood at the top of the younger generation. Compared to the vast Eastern Baron territory, the Burning Sun Empire was too small. It was like a grain of sand thrown into the sea. They could not imagine how many geniuses there were in the entire East Baron and what level they had reached. But now, Lu Ming had surpassed all of them and stood at the peak of all the proud sons of heaven. How could they not be shocked? He was secretly pleased with himself. Lu Ming was someone who had come from the Blazing Sun Empire. They did not ask Lu Ming why he brought them here. They knew that Lu Ming definitely did it for their own good. There was no one who was reluctant to part with their foundation, because all they could see here were magnificent rivers and mountains. Some places were unimaginably rich in heaven and earth Ling Qi. Compared to them, the Burning Sun Empire was like a garbage dump, a wild land. There was no way to compare. And those experts, any one of them gave them a feeling of unfathomability. A place like this was much, much better than the Burning Sun Empire. This was normal. Mount Liangyi was a famous blessed land in the East Baron. It spanned tens of millions of miles and had countless blessed lands. Some of the talisman puppet sect disciples didn't care about it, but in the eyes of Lin Shui, Hua Qi, and the others, it was a priceless treasure. Some people's eyes were already shining. How fast would their progress be if they cultivated in such an environment? Lu Ming brought everyone around. Not long after, an elder came and said that everyone's accommodation had been arranged. Lu Ming led the group and followed the elder. The rest of the talisman sect members left one by one. Only Bai Qishue, Fatty, and Ruan Tingting were following him. First, it was the residence of the mystical sword sect. It was a mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles. On top of it were 7 huge mountain peaks that pierced the sky. It was extremely magnificent. On it, spiritual qi was faintly discernible, and spiritual medicine was everywhere. It was like a fairyland. Compared to the mountain gate of the mystical sword sect, it was tens or even hundreds of times better. Lin Shui and the rest were overjoyed. They kept thanking the talisman sect's elder. The elder knew that these were Lu Ming's close friends and they had an extraordinary relationship. Naturally, he did not dare to thank them. After that, Lin Shui brought the thousands of people from the mystical sword sect to stay. Of course, there were more people in the mystical sword sect. Those who didn't want to come were not brought along. Those with low cultivation and talent were dismissed. Those who were brought along were those with high cultivation and talent. Master Lin, there are countless people on Mount Liangyi, but not all of them cultivate the Tao of inscription. Some of them are not suitable for the Tao of inscription, but those who are suitable for martial arts can be selected as disciples by the mystical sword sect in the future. Lu Ming said with a smile. The Yin and Yang mountain stretched for thousands of miles. Not all of them were disciples of the talisman sect. There were also countless mortals living in some flat territories, and some of them had even established countries. After all, it stretched for tens of millions of miles. It was simply too vast, as large as some small-scale regions. After that, he bade farewell to Lin Shui and the others. He flew for hundreds of thousands of miles to arrange a place for Hua Qi and the other members of the Burning Sun Empire. This place was not the slightest bit inferior to the mystical sword sect. After that, it was the Lu family's residence. There were fewer people from the Lu family. They were arranged to stay on a huge mountain peak. The heaven and earth spiritual qi on this peak was extremely rich. It was the best on the Yin and Yang mountain. There were many palaces built on it, just enough for people to live in. Zhuang Xiaoro and Zhuang Shaoshan were temporarily staying with the Lu family. After making all the arrangements, Lu Ming heaved a long sigh of relief and felt at ease. He then chatted with Lu Ming and Yun Tian about their experiences during this period of time. A few hours later, Lu Ming returned to the Cloud Peak residence and sat cross-legged in his room. With luck on his side, he had yet to properly sense what benefits he had obtained. He sat cross-legged and circulated the true war dragon technique. However, he stopped after a while. This was because he felt that his body was completely normal. There was no change compared to before. The only change was that he was more focused and his thinking was more flexible. Lu Ming, try to comprehend the essence realm of heaven and earth. On his shoulder, Dandan was holding a spirit herb and gnawing on it, her mouth full of medicinal fragrance. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat and he began to comprehend the essence realm of heaven and earth. When Lu Ming calmed down, he immediately felt that his mind was extremely clear. The artistic conception of the heaven and earth around him was also extremely clear. It was as if his thoughts had become one with the entire heaven and earth. The speed at which I can comprehend the essence realm of heaven and earth is 10 times faster than before. Lu Ming was extremely shocked. At this moment, he did not use the path understanding ancient tree, but the speed at which he comprehended concepts was so terrifying that it shocked Lu Ming. Do you feel it? With fate in your body, it won't change your body or your cultivation, but it will greatly increase your comprehension and become more compatible with the heavens and earth. In the future, whether it's comprehending intent or anything higher, you'll be like a fish in water. Of course, it's also faster to comprehend other martial arts techniques. Dandan explained. It can actually change one's perception. Then my power of comprehension has increased by 10 times. Lu Ming's heart beat faster and his eyes were filled with ecstasy. Everyone's comprehension was fixed. It could be said that they were born with it. It was a kind of talent. He did not expect that Lu Ming's current comprehension could be improved. This was too shocking. Chapter 980. 980 Official Zongzi. Lu Ming, how much has your comprehension improved? Dandan asked. About 10 times. Lu Ming said. What? 10 times. Dandan directly jumped up from Lu Ming's shoulder, her face full of shock. Nest, I'm so envious. It actually increased tenfold all of a sudden. This means that you will be able to comprehend anything 10 times faster in the future. I'm so envious. Dandan shouted. Is 10 times that much? Lu Ming said. He had the path understanding ancient tree. With the help of the path understanding ancient tree, the speed at which he comprehended concepts was more than 10 times faster. Kid, what do you know? This is your own comprehension ability and the improvement of your foundation. How can the path understanding ancient tree compare to it? Let me tell you, in the short term, you have the path understanding ancient tree and even the devouring talent of the 9 dragons, but it doesn't seem to be of much use to the improvement of comprehension. But when your realm is higher, you will know how much use it is. Dandan began to ramble on. The path understanding ancient tree has its limits. Its principle is to be in harmony with heaven and earth. It can emit the aura of the great path. At a lower level, the effect is naturally good, but there is a limit. When your cultivation reaches a certain level, the things you need to comprehend are many times higher than the intent realm of heaven and earth. The effect of the path understanding ancient tree will be small. The 9 dragons' devouring talent is even more so. You should be able to devour other people's intent runes and improve your intent, right? However, level 4 is the limit of the will of heaven and earth. The next step is the domain of the martial royal realm, which is not a will rune. It has no physical body, so the 9 dragons' devouring talent can't devour it at all. If you want to improve it, you have to comprehend it yourself. Now, do you know how precious it is to improve your comprehension? After saying that, Dandan looked at Lu Ming. I see. Lu Ming thought to himself that the 9 dragons' devouring talent was not omnipotent. After becoming a martial emperor, one's intent could be transformed into a domain, and it could not be improved by devouring. One had to comprehend it on their own. Lu Ming finally understood how precious it was to improve his comprehension. This was a talent that would follow him for a lifetime. Lu Ming, you're more in tune with this world now. If you break through to the rank of a martial emperor one day, it'll be easier for you to cultivate than others. This is your advantage. Dandan said again. Above martial emperor. There was a look of anticipation in Lu Ming's eyes, but he then shook his head. That realm was too far away from him. What he had to do now was to take it one step at a time and break through to the spiritual god realm as soon as possible. Only those at the spiritual god realm could be considered as the top experts in the divine wilderness continent. Then, Lu Ming closed his eyes and began to comprehend the essence realm of heaven and earth. At this moment, the news that Lu Ming had won first place in the Battle of Providence had spread throughout the entire Mount Liangyi. The entire Mount Liangyi was in shock and ecstasy. After so many years, someone from the Talisman sect had finally won first place in the Battle of Providence and obtained great providence. Many people remembered that there was a rainbow light from the sky above Mount Liangyi. Some light scattered, which might be the result of the descent of fate. Some of them were even inspired by the good fortune and broke through to the next realm. They were extremely grateful to Lu Ming. Lu Ming's name once again shocked Mount Liangyi. Then, at a terrifying speed, it spread to the entire eastern wilderness and covered it. Time flew by and 2 days passed. One day, Fatty and Ruan Tingting went to look for Lu Ming. Lu Ming, Master came to look for us. He said he'll take us to cultivate. We're leaving. The Fatty bade farewell to Lu Ming. Fatty, this is a good thing. Help me thank Senior Motian. Lu Ming said with a smile. Ai. Lu Ming, I wanted to stay and help you deal with the Emperor Sky Divine Palace, but my master, that old man, is very unyielding this time. He wants me to go with him. Humph, I knew it. That old man is afraid of De. When he saw De's original body, he didn't dare to say anything. Fatty said unhappily. Fatty, don't worry. This is Mount Liangyi. With the yin-yang sky formation, De can't enter. Practice well. Don't be completely crushed by me next time. Lu Ming said with a smile. Don't worry, the next time we meet, I'll definitely catch up to you. The Fatty grinned. Fatty, take this opportunity. Tingting is a good girl, don't let her run away. Lu Ming sent a voice transmission to the Fatty. The Fatty blushed and sent a voice transmission to Lu Ming. Don't worry, what kind of person am I? How can the woman I like escape from my grasp? The next time I see you, I'll definitely make you my uncle. Hey, damn fatty, what are you guys secretly talking about? Wan Tingting glared at Fatty with hostility. No, nothing much. The fat man's expression changed and he shook his head. Lu Ming, we're leaving. Take care. Wan Tingting bade Lu Ming farewell. Take care. Lu Ming cupped his fists. Then, Fatty and Wan Tingting turned around and left. A day later, Bai Shijin, Du Songjua and the other elders of the Talisman Amulet sect informed the Liangyi Mountain of the Talisman Amulet sect that Lu Ming was to be the Zongzi of the Talisman Amulet sect. He was an official Zongzi, not a Zongzi candidate. He would be in charge of the Talisman Amulet sect in the future. This time, no one objected. Even Huan Zhen, Wen Zongzi, and the other Zongzi candidates stood out to support Lu Ming. This time, Lu Ming had won first place in the Battle of Providence, accumulating great fortune for the Talisman Amulet sect. Moreover, the news that Lu Ming was the successor of Emperor Liaozong had already spread. It was perfectly justifiable for Lu Ming to be promoted to a Zongzi. No one else was more suitable than him. There were many people who were blessed with good luck and benefited from it. They were grateful to Lu Ming and supported him. Lu Ming had become the Zongzi of the Talisman sect. In the center of 9 dragons, where the dragon veins of the 9 dragons converged, Martial Emperor De sat at the head of a huge hall. More than a dozen people stood below him, including the masters of the 6 ancient families. Apart from the 6 great ancient families, the other people all had powerful auras, as deep as the ocean and unfathomable. They were all supreme-level figures. The Talisman Amulet sect will be destroyed. 6 great aristocratic families, D Tian Imperial Guards, immediately gather your men and attack the Talisman Amulet sect. Martial Emperor De gave the order. Yes. All the supreme martial artists acknowledged the order in unison. This time, I will personally lead the troops. Martial Emperor De's voice was heard. In the residence of Hua Qi and the others on Mount Liangyi, Lu Ming, Hua Qi, and Pang Shi sat at a table, drinking and chatting. It was as if they had returned to the days when they had cultivated together in the mystical sword sect. The 3 of them had not had a drink together for many years. Back in the mystical sword sect, Lu Ming was only 15 years old. Now, he was already 23 years old. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 8 years had passed. The 3 of them were no longer young and inexperienced youths. They had already entered the age of youth. Right now, Pang Shi's body was extremely burly and muscular. He was more than 2 meters tall, and his aura was wild. His cultivation had already reached the half-step king realm, and he was only 1 step away from the king realm. This level of cultivation was already considered top tier in the Blazing Sun Empire. Hua Qi was busy with political affairs and had a slightly weaker cultivation. He was at the 9th level of Wuzong. Chapter 981. 981 Chapter 981 Inquiry. Hua Qi, I've dragged you into this because of me. You've abandoned the Burning Sun Empire and come to Mount Liangyi. Come, I'll drink this as punishment. Lu Ming picked up the glass and drank it in one go. Lu Ming, don't say that. The Blazing Sun Empire is so small. You won't be able to achieve anything there. The spiritual energy in the heaven and earth at Mount Liangyi is more than 100 times stronger than that of the Blazing Sun Empire. Moreover, the elites of the Blazing Sun Empire are all here. When your cultivation improves in the future, you'll have countless Blazing Sun Empires. Hua Qi laughed heartily. In the world of martial Tao, everything is fake. Only cultivation and strength are real. I used to be busy with political affairs and neglected cultivation. From now on, I'll work hard on cultivation. Hua Qi raised his wine cup and drank it in one gulp. Although the Blazing Sun Empire had been conquered by the ancestors of the Hua family, now that he had stepped out of the Blazing Sun Empire, his horizons had been broadened. He was very clear that the Blazing Sun Empire was just a small piece of land. Without power, any spiritual ocean tier warrior in the Eastern Barren Territory could easily destroy the Blazing Sun Empire. He understood that strength was king. Hua Qi, sure tell you, there's something inside that might be useful to you. Lu Ming took out 2 storage rings and handed them to Hua Qi and Pang Shi. There were some spiritual herbs, cultivation techniques, martial arts secret manuals, various materials for spiritual weapons, etc. They were not of much use to Lu Ming, but it was good to leave them for Hua Qi and the others. Hua Qi and Pang Shi didn't decline this time and accepted it. They knew very well that Lu Ming's current realm was too high, far higher than theirs. Many things that were of no use to Lu Ming were very useful to them. Moreover, with their relationship, they would not be pretentious. In fact, before this, Lu Ming had left some things behind in the mystical sword sect and the Lu family. They were the spoils of war that he had obtained from the enemy during this period of time. To Lu Ming, they were indeed of no use. Lu Ming, let's not talk about other things. Come, let's have a drink. Hua Qi and Pang Shi raised their wine glasses. The 3 of them clinked their glasses and drank the wine in one go. Ha, Lu Ming, you might not know this, but Big Rock is already married and he's about to become a father. Hua Qi laughed heartily. Really? Lu Ming's eyes lit up and he smiled. Big Rock, you're amazing. When did this happen? It's a pity that I didn't know about it. Otherwise, I'd have to go and congratulate you. Pang Shi scratched his head, and a look of happiness appeared on his honest face. It happened last year. The child will be born in half a year. As she said that, she blushed slightly. Ha, look at Shi Tianyu, his face is red. Hua Qi laughed. Don't you know that Hua Qi has 9 concubines? He has 5 children now. Pang Shi said. 9 concubines? You already have 5 children. Lu Ming was stunned. He looked impressed and said, love-struck fool, not bad. You're so powerful. I'll punish you. I'll punish you. I'll punish you with 3 glasses. No, I'll punish you with 9 glasses. Sigh, I had no choice. Those ministers are urging me to have an heir as soon as possible. I had no choice. Hua Qi's face was bitter as he drank a few cups of wine. Lu Ming and Pang Shi laughed. Lu Ming, what about you? We're already ahead of you, so you have to work hard. Pang Shi looked at Lu Ming with a grin. Me? Lu Ming was slightly stunned. He picked up the glass and took a sip. A few figures appeared in his mind. Qiu Yu had been taken away by an overseas expert, and no one knew where she was now. I haven't seen Mulan since I left Tianxian region. I don't know where she went. Slowly, a figure appeared in her mind. Xian Yanqing's figure. It had been a year and a half since Xian Yanqing was brought back to the ancient Saint dynasty. How was he doing now? Lu Ming's thoughts were running wild. Shi Tianyu, you don't have to worry about Lu Ming. He's such a hero. How could he lack beauties by his side? Didn't you see that he has a few stunning beauties by his side? Hua Qi said with a smile. Yes, yes, come, let's drink. Pang Shi nodded repeatedly. Lu Ming adjusted his mood and shouted at the 2 of them. Lu Ming was very relaxed, and open-minded when he was with Hua Qi and Pang Shi. The 3 of them had known each other since they were young. They had experienced the war in the Burning Sun Empire and had gone through life and death situations. Their friendship was pure, and there were no impurities in their relationship. As the 3 of them drank, they talked about their cultivation in the mystical sword sect. Then, they talked about their experiences after that. The three of them drank for a few hours. Lu Ming's heart was filled with warmth. The path of cultivation was very lonely. Sometimes, one would need friends. Perhaps there was a gap between their cultivation bases, and as time passed, this gap would grow bigger and bigger. However, once they sat together and held a cup of wine, there was no gap between them. There was only pure friendship between them. After 3 rounds of wine, the three of them left. Lu Ming did not return to Cloud Peak residence. Instead, he headed to Yan Kuangtu's residence. When Lu Ming arrived, Yan Kuangtu was in the middle of a discussion with the 9 Sons Supreme. Lu Ming, is there anything you need us for? Supreme 9 Sons said. A token appeared in Lu Ming's hand. It was the mixed essence token that he had obtained when he had won first place in the Battle of Providence. Big Brother Yan, Senior Jiuyang, I want to ask you, what is the use of this mixed essence token? Lu Ming asked. Mixed essence token? The 9 Sons Supreme Master raised his eyebrows, and a hint of solemnity appeared on his face. Yan Kuangtu, on the other hand, seemed to be at a loss. Actually, I don't know much. It's said that in the Battle of Providence, only those who pass a certain standard can get a mixed essence token. In the past, someone in the East Continent also got this kind of token. Supreme 9 Sons said. Could it be that Senior Jiuyang and Big Brother Yan didn't obtain such a token? Lu Ming asked in surprise. How talented were the 9 Sons Supreme and Yan Kuangtu? They had all participated in the Battle of Karmic Luck, so how could it be that they had never obtained such a token? No, I didn't get it, 9 Sons Supreme Master shook his head and said. Madman didn't get it either. As far as I know, some emperors didn't even get it when they were young. I've read about it in an ancient book. Only a very, very small number of extremely talented prodigies have the chance to obtain it. It's said that obtaining this token may be a great opportunity, but it may also be a great crisis. Lu Ming, did you get any news when you obtained the Primordial Chaos token? A sentence echoed in my head. It was, congratulations on passing the preliminary test. There was no other information other than that. Lu Ming said. As expected. The eyes of the 9 Sons Supreme Master shone with a shocking light. Lu Ming, you've experienced the Battle of Providence. You should be able to sense that there's an unimaginable existence behind this Battle of Providence, or an unimaginable force that's controlling everything, right? The Supreme Martial Artist of the 9 Sons asked. Yes, that's true. Lu Ming nodded. I feel the same way. Master, do you know what's behind this? Yan Kuangtu asked. Chapter 982. 982 The Attack of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. I don't know anything. Even the emperors don't know anything about it, let alone me. Perhaps only the person who has the Primordial Chaos token knows a little. The ancient book I once read was recorded by an ancient emperor hundreds of thousands of years ago. At that time, there was already a Battle of Providence. That emperor also obtained a mixed essence token when he was young. According to his records, the Battle of Providence seems to be a selection of geniuses. It's only the beginning. If you meet certain standards and obtain a mixed essence token, you can take the next test, but it's very dangerous. According to the records of that emperor, he's seen countless geniuses who were more talented than him die. He was only lucky to survive and obtain some opportunities. Supreme Master Jiuyang stopped here. Lu Ming and Yan Kuangtu were extremely shocked. The emperors from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Had the Battle of Karmic Luck been going on for so long? One had to know that an emperor could only live for 10 to 20,000 years at most. What kind of existence or power would take such a long time to select a heaven's favorite? Also, that emperor had seen countless geniuses who were more talented than him die. What kind of geniuses were those? To become an emperor, which one of them didn't have unparalleled talent? Which one of them wasn't unparalleled? A divine emperor was talented enough, but he only had the potential to reach the emperor realm. He wasn't 100% sure that he could. The supreme master of the 9 sons, Yan Kuangtu, which one of them wasn't an unparalleled talent? They also didn't have the confidence to break through to the emperor realm. However, the ancient emperor said that he had seen countless heaven's favorites who were stronger than him die. Even he had survived by luck. Could it be that the person with the token would have a new test later on? Master, what else did the ancient emperor say? Did he say what kind of existence is behind it? Yan Kuangtu asked curiously. There's nothing else. There's no more records. That ancient emperor didn't have the right to know what happened below. He wasn't qualified enough. 9 Sons Supreme Master shook his head. Lu Ming and Yan Kuangtu were extremely shocked. The things hidden behind the Battle of Providence were beyond their imagination. Lu Ming, the fact that you're able to obtain the primordial chaos token means that you've been acknowledged. Perhaps there will be greater opportunities in the future. Keep it for now and don't think too much about it. Supreme 9 Sons said. Lu Ming nodded. Is Supreme Martial Artist Yan here? At this moment, a voice came from outside. He was here to find Yan Kuangtu. Yes, please come in. Yan Kuangtu waved his hand, and the gate of the courtyard opened. A middle-aged man walked in. Lu Ming recognized him as an elder of the Talisman sect. The middle-aged man's eyes swept over the crowd and he quickly saluted. Fan Xing pays his respects to Zongzi, Senior Jiuyang, and Supreme Martial Artist Yan. Elder Fong, what is the matter? Yan Kuangtu asked. I'm here on the orders of the 2 sect masters and the doyens to invite Supreme Yan and Senior Jiuyang. I was going to invite Zongzi and the doyens to the meeting hall to discuss something. Fan Xing said. Oh. There must be something important for the elders of both factions to be gathered here. We'll head over now. Lu Ming said. Immediately, Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, 9 Sons Supreme, and Fan Xing went to the discussion hall. When they arrived, Fan Xing left, as he was not qualified to participate. Everyone, the great army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace is here to attack. Martial Emperor De will lead the army personally. As soon as Lu Ming and the rest arrived, Bai Shijin sent a message. De really can't hold back. He's going to make a move, 9 Sons Supreme said, his eyes focused. Seniors, what do you plan to do next? Lu Ming asked. We've already discussed it. Mount Liangyi is a natural formation. With the blessing of the patriarchs of the Talisman Amulet sect, we don't have to worry about its defense. Even De can't break in. Therefore, we have decided to give up all the territories of the Talisman Amulet sect. We will withdraw all the disciples and experts of the Talisman Amulet sect to the Yin and Yang Mountain and use the Great Formation to resist the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. Bai Shijin said. Lu Ming's heart sank and he sighed in his heart. With the Talisman Amulet sect's current strength, they were simply unable to fight against the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. Even if De did not move, they were no match for the forces below, let alone De and Martial Emperor. The best way now was to use the formation of Mount Liangyi to defend and slowly accumulate strength for a counterattack. After discussing the specific steps, they sent out orders one by one, asking the experts in the territory of the Talisman Amulet sect to retreat to the Yin and Yang Mountain. Senior Jiuyang, I have an item that should be of some help to you. Lu Ming suddenly said while everyone was discussing. Oh. The Supreme Martial Artist of the 9 Sons asked doubtfully. The others also looked at Lu Ming. Lu Ming waved his hand and a jade-like figure appeared in the hall. Could this be the legendary Heaven and Earth Jade Essence? When Bai Shijin, Du Songjue and the others saw this, their eyes almost popped out. They were tongue-tied. That's right, it's the Heaven and Earth Jade Essence. I obtained it in the Battle of Fate. Senior 9 Yang, with this, I wonder if you can form a physical body. Lu Ming said. At this moment, Supreme Master Jiuyang's eyes shone with a shocking light, as if they were two suns. My soul is already very solid now. If I add a few more materials and this heaven and earth jade essence, I can completely condense a physical body and return to my peak. Supreme Master Jiuyang said after taking a deep breath. His voice trembled a little, showing how excited he was. Really? Ha ha ha, that's great. Yan Kuangtu was overjoyed and laughed in excitement. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others were also overjoyed. What kind of person was the Supreme Master of the Nine Sons? He was known as the #1 Supreme Being in the East Baron. If Supreme Master Jiuyang could form a new body, the Talisman Amulet sect's strength would undoubtedly increase greatly. They would have another Supreme Being. How could they not be excited? It would be extremely important if the Nine Sons Supreme could reform his body during this war. That's good. I still have a bottle of life potion here. It might be useful. Lu Ming took out another bottle of life potion, shocking Bai Shijin and the rest. It seemed that Lu Ming had indeed obtained a great opportunity in the Battle of Providence. Lu Ming, thank you. The Nine Sons Supreme did not stand on ceremony. He stared into Lu Ming's eyes and said solemnly. Senior Jiuyang, there's no need to be so polite with me. Without you, I wouldn't be where I am today. As long as I can help Senior Jiuyang, this is nothing. Lu Ming smiled. Lu Ming, I have to thank you too. From now on, you're my best brother. Yan Kuangtu patted Lu Ming's shoulder. Wasn't it in the past? Lu Ming asked with a smile. Yes, I've always been, ha ha ha. Yan Kuangtu laughed. With the Heaven-Earth Jade Essence and the Elixir of Life, the rest of the materials were easy to obtain. The Talisman sect managed to gather the required materials in no time, and the Nine Sons Paragon also went into seclusion to reforge his physical body. Chapter 983. 983 Yin and Yang Formation and Martial Emperor. As the days passed, the Empyrean Heavenly Divine Palace also launched a fierce attack on the Talisman Amulet sect. However, the Talisman Amulet sect didn't resist at all. Wherever the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace's army passed by, the territory of the Talisman Amulet sect surrendered. In just a month, all the territories of the Talisman Amulet sect were occupied by the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. The Talisman Amulet sect was only left with the Yin-Yang Mountain. On this day, the roars of beasts could be heard outside the Yin and Yang Mountain. Countless powerful beings appeared outside of Mount Liangyi, riding on all kinds of fierce beasts. Their iron hooves stomped in the air, shaking the entire space. The flags fluttered and covered the sky. The aura of countless powerhouses was so strong that the sky changed color. The great army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace had arrived. Buzz! The entire Mount Liangyi glowed, and countless inscriptions filled the air. The power of heaven and earth rose, and a huge Taiji diagram appeared in the sky above Mount Liangyi. The yin-yang fish appeared and covered the entire Mount Liangyi. Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and many other elders stood at the edge of Mount Liangyi, watching from afar through the formation. Boom! Boom! Heaven and earth shook as if a giant was stepping through the air. One after another, terrifying auras shot up into the sky. 10 figures appeared in front of the army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. Their vast auras burst out. Each of them was like an invincible god of war. The heads of the 6 great ancient families were all here, and the other 4 were undoubtedly at the same level. The 10 great masters. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, if you know what's good for you, quickly surrender and hand over Lu Ming. Perhaps you can still ensure the safety of your Talisman Amulet sect. Otherwise, once the formation is broken, everyone in the Talisman Amulet sect will be killed. The patriarch of the Wang clan was the first to speak. His voice was filled with killing intent. If you have the ability, then break the formation. If you can break the formation, we will die without regrets. Bai Shijin coldly replied. It's said that the formation of Mount Liangyi can't be broken. I want to see if the rumor is true. The Wang clan leader's body was engulfed in flames. The scorching flames burned the space into nothingness, revealing a dark void that was deep and terrifying. Whoosh! It was a flaming sword that was thousands of meters long, and it exuded a terrifying aura. Even though they were separated by the array, many of the talisman sect's disciples revealed looks of fear. In front of a supreme martial artist, they felt like ants that were difficult to contend against. Slash! The master of the Wang family roared and slashed his flame sword at the yin and yang mountain. This sword could tear space apart and penetrate the earth. It had the power to destroy heaven and earth. The space was shattered by the sword. It was the first time for many of the talisman amulet sect's disciples to see a supreme martial artist's power. They were shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. Boom! The flaming sword slashed at the Taiji diagram above Mount Liangyi. The heavens and earth trembled, but the Tai Chi diagram did not shake at all. It was as stable as Mount Tai. The sword light disappeared, and the Jiang family's master looked gloomy. The yin and yang formation can't be broken by an emperor. Wang Xingtian, who do you think you are? Du Songjue coldly berated, causing the killing intent in the Wang family head's eyes to surge. Buzz! Above his head, the extreme purple heavenly fire bloodline appeared. He performed the bloodline fusion and turned into a flaming sword. He slashed at the yin and yang battle again. But this time, just like the last time, the yin and yang formation did not move at all, which made the head of the Wang family look even uglier. When the talisman amulet sect's disciples saw this, they finally let out a long sigh of relief. In the past, it was rumored that the yin and yang formation could not be broken by emperors. However, it was just a rumor and he was not confident about it. They were more worried when they saw the terrifying aura of the supreme martial artist. But now, they didn't have to worry anymore. The facts had proven that the yin and yang formation was strong and immortal. Let's attack together. I don't believe we can't break this formation. The patriarch of the Wang clan said to the other 9. All right. The other 9 people nodded. Boom! Boom! The 10 great supremes burst forth at the same time with an earth-shattering aura. The space around them couldn't withstand the terrifying pressure and crumbled. Behind them, the army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace retreated hurriedly, retreating a full 10,000 miles. In the next moment, the 10 Supreme Masters attacked at the same time. 10 terrifying attacks attacked the yin and yang formation at the same time. Maintain the formation. Bai Shijin's voice was transmitted far away. Many elders and disciples were pouring their spiritual energy into the array platforms. There were countless platforms all over the yin and yang mountain that were connected to the yin and yang battle. The disciples of the talisman sect could continuously inject their spiritual power to maintain the power of the yin and yang mountain formation. There were simply too many of such platforms scattered all over the place. They weren't afraid that the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace's spies in the talisman amulet sect would destroy all of them. After all, destroying a few platforms wouldn't affect the grand formation at all unless they destroyed all of them. But that was impossible. How big was the yin and yang mountain? Even if there were spies, Bai Shijin and the others could kill them in time. Boom! 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 The attacks of the 10 Supremes only caused slight ripples on the Taiji diagram, which was negligible. The yin and yang formation was not just for show. I'll do it. From the depths of the army of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace, a voice rang out. The next moment, a golden sword light slashed through the space, vast and mighty, like the might of the heavens, slashing down towards the Taiji diagram. Boom! The entire Mount Liangyi seemed to jump and shake. However, the Tai Chi diagram glowed and blocked this sword light. Whoosh! Whoosh! But immediately after, one sword light after another slashed down violently. Accompanied by the sword light that was like the might of the heavens, a person stepped through the air. Martial Emperor De. His figure was not very burly, but he gave people a feeling that he was as tall as the sky. He stood casually in the void like a god that could support the sky and earth. His body was filled with golden light. Each ray of golden light turned into a combat sword and slashed at the yin and yang formation. Boom! Boom! Waves appeared on the Tai Chi diagram, and it kept shaking. Maintain it. Bai Shijin's voice spread far and wide. In front of all the platforms, the Talisman Amulet sect's disciples continued to pour in their mental energy fire to maintain the power of the formation. Buzz! Tens of thousands of golden lights gathered on Martial Emperor De's body and turned into a huge sword, which slashed down. Boom! 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 The sky rumbled and the void shattered, revealing a terrifying spatial crack that was thousands of miles long. Bai Shijin and the others looked extremely serious. The strength of Martial Emperor De was beyond their imagination. The yin and yang formation seemed to be under great pressure. Fortunately, in the end, the yin and yang formation still withstood the attack and was not broken. Martial Emperor De restrained his aura, and his face was a little gloomy. Bai Shijin and the others let out a long breath. Although the ancestors of the Talisman sect had said that martial emperors could not break the yin and yang formation, Martial Emperor De's reputation was too great. He was invincible in the Eastern Barren territory. Before this, no one had any confidence. If the yin and yang formation was broken, the Talisman sect would be completely annihilated and there would be no one left in the yin and yang mountain. Boom! 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 At this moment, there was a deafening sound from a mountain peak deep in the yin and yang mountain. Then, a sun emerged from the mountain peak. Chapter 984. 984 The reappearance of the Nine Suns, the boundless blood sea. There used to be a sun in the sky, and now there was another one floating in the middle of Mount Liangyi. It was extremely bright, competing with the sun in the sky. However, this was only the beginning. After a few breaths, another sun appeared. Then, one sun after another appeared in the sky, competing with the real sun. In the end, a total of 9 suns appeared. They were so bright that no one could open their eyes. Boom! A burly figure rushed out of the mountain peak and stood under the 9 suns. He was like a sun god descending to the world, giving people an indescribable shock. Master! Yan Kuangtu was ecstatic. Jiuyang, it's Xia Jiuyang. Outside the yin and yang formation, the masters of the Wang and Jiang families shouted in disbelief. Wasn't the supreme being of the 9 suns only left with a wisp of his soul? But from the looks of it, he had clearly recovered his physical body, and his aura was powerful and unrivaled. All the supreme martial artists of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace had extremely grave expressions. Among them, there were many supreme martial artists who had worked with the 9 Suns supreme martial artist before and knew how terrifying he was. The supreme of 9 Suns used to be known as the #1 supreme in the Eastern Barren territory. Even someone as powerful as Yan Kuangtu didn't have this title, because Yan Kuangtu had his own rivals, while the supreme of 9 Suns had no rivals below the martial emperor realm. Senior Jiuyang. Lu Ming was overjoyed. It seemed that the 9 Suns supreme had succeeded. Bai Shijin and the others also looked happy. The 9 Suns supreme master had recovered, and their power was much stronger. The 9 Suns supreme martial artist alone was equivalent to several supreme martial artists. Boom! With a loud boom, the 9 suns trembled and slowly shrank, turning into 9 light spots and entering the body of the 9 Suns Supreme Master. Buzz! With a flash of light, the 9 Suns Supreme appeared beside Lu Ming and the others. Senior Jiuyang, you've recovered? Lu Ming was extremely excited. Ha, I've reformed my physical body. However, it'll take some time for me to recover my peak cultivation and combat strength. The 9 Suns Supreme Master said with a smile. That's great, ha! Yan Kuangtu was overjoyed and laughed. When the other elders of the Talisman sect heard about this, they were also extremely excited. This was a boost to their morale. The 9 Yang Supreme Master's reputation was too great. He was invincible among supremes below the Martial Emperor realm. This was a huge boost to the morale of the Talisman Amulet sect. Xia Jiuyang has really recovered. The Wang clan master and the others widened their eyes in shock. Jiuyang, I didn't expect you to be able to recover your physical body. Martial Emperor De also frowned slightly. What's wrong? De, you didn't expect this, did you? It's all thanks to Lu Ming that I have the chance to recover. Moreover, good fortune and bad luck come together. After this disaster, I may be able to reach a higher level. 9 Suns Supreme said as he stared at Martial Emperor De. His words were like a sudden clap of thunder, causing the Wang clan's clan master, Bai Shijin, and the others to be greatly shocked. The only difference was that the Wang clan master and the others were shocked, while Bai Shijin and the others were ecstatic. The 9 Suns Paragon had already reached the supreme level and had reached the peak. What did it mean to be able to reach the next level? Wouldn't he be at the Martial Royal Realm? Could the 9 Suns Supreme possibly break through to the Martial Royal Realm? This was too shocking. It had been thousands of years since a new martial emperor had been born in the eastern wilderness. A martial emperor could live for 10 to 20,000 years, but after so many years, how many martial emperors were there in the eastern barren territory? They could be counted with the fingers. If the 9 Suns Supreme had really broken through to the Martial Royal Realm, the Talisman Amulet sect would have the capital to fight against the Emperor Heaven Divine Palace. De's eyes were filled with amazing brilliance. He said, Jiuyang, you've indeed gained a blessing in disguise and obtained a great opportunity. You've wandered for decades as a remnant soul, which has improved your cultivation. At the same time, your new body and soul have a compelling spirituality. You do have the chance to take that step and become a martial emperor. You're indeed the disciple I've chosen. All of this is thanks to you. Supreme 9 Suns said. Ha, Jiuyang, even so, it'll be difficult for you to cross it in 10 years. After 10 years, you and the Yin and Yang mountain will be turned into ashes. Even if you break through to the Martial Royal Realm, do you think you can compete with me? Martial Emperor De laughed, full of invincible confidence. The hearts of Bai Shijin and the others sank. Not to mention when the 9 Suns Supreme would break through. Even if he could break through, was he really a match for Martial Emperor De? It had been 10,000 years since De became a martial emperor. No one could say what realm he had reached. I've said that the Talisman sect will be destroyed. You won't have any chance. Although the Yin and Yang formation is powerful, it's not invincible. Martial Emperor De's voice came out, and a blood-red light emitted from between his eyebrows. Walala. The next moment, there was the sound of waves crashing. A sea of blood appeared in front of Martial Emperor De. It was a sea of blood. Furthermore, the blood sea was expanding rapidly. 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles. In the end, it expanded to millions of miles wide, covering the entire area of Mount Liangyi. The sea of blood covered the sky, causing the Talisman Amulet sect to be completely dark. Not a single ray of sunlight could be seen. This is boundless blood sea. How was that possible? There really is such a heaven-defying treasure in the world. Du Songjue cried out in shock. Bai Shijin, Meng Chong, and the other experts who had heard of the name of the boundless blood sea also widened their eyes in shock. Bai Shijin, what's going on with this boundless blood sea? How come I've never heard of such a treasure? Yan Kuangtu asked. I don't know either. I only read about it in the ancient records. It doesn't exist in the divine wilderness continent. This boundless blood sea has a terrifying power, which is to break arrays. It can cover an array and corrode its foundation, thus completely destroying the array. I didn't expect DE to have a treasure like this. Bai Shijin's face was extremely ugly. Yan Kuangtu's face darkened when he heard this. I guess it's a treasure that Martial Emperor DE brought back from overseas. He has been planning to deal with the Yin and Yang mountain for a long time. Supreme Nine Sun said. The world is so big, the divine wilderness is but a drop in the ocean. I brought this back from overseas, and it is enough to break the array of your Mount Liangyi. Martial Emperor DE's voice was heard. The patriarch of the Wang clan and the others were overjoyed. Walala! The blood sea rolled and covered the Yin and Yang formation. The blood-colored sea water seeped into the mountain along the border of the Yin and Yang mountain, destroying the mountain. Lu Ming and the rest even heard a sizzling sound. How did this happen? Some of the talisman sect's elders shouted anxiously. There's no need to panic. Although the boundless blood sea is strong, the Yin and Yang formation has its own natural power. Even the boundless blood sea can't break the Yin and Yang formation in a short time. Bai Shijin said, trying to comfort everyone. Standing outside the Yin and Yang formation, Martial Emperor DE looked at the rolling blood sea and ordered, the limitless blood sea can't break the Yin and Yang formation in a short period of time. Leave a group of people here to guard this place and prevent the talisman amulet sect from escaping. Also, guard the teleportation formations at all places. Yes, Your Majesty. The supreme martial artists received the order. Martial Emperor DE's body moved and disappeared. Chapter 985. 985 5 years, time. Inside the Yin-Yang mountain, it was dark. Everywhere was covered in blood. The sky was covered by the blood sea. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the rest sent out a few messages to calm the people down. The talisman amulet sect then slowly calmed down. In the talisman amulet sect's conference hall, Lu Ming, Yan Kuangtu, Nine Suns Supreme, and the higher-ups of the talisman amulet sect were sitting together to discuss some matters. However, the atmosphere was very solemn. Everyone felt as if a huge stone was weighing on their hearts. Senior White, Senior Du, how long can the Yin and Yang formation last? Lu Ming asked. Bai Shijin pondered for a moment and said, the great formation of Mount Liangyi mainly borrows the power of the mountains and rivers. At the same time, it is reinforced by the formation skills of the ancestors. It is indestructible. On the other hand, the main function of the boundless blood sea is corrosion. It slowly corrodes the foundation of the formation skills and then breaks the formation skills. This requires a process. As long as our talisman amulet sect's disciples constantly inject their mental energy to maintain the formation and resist it, it should be possible to maintain it for 5 years. Yes, it's about the same time as I expected. Du Songjue also nodded. 5 years. Many people were slightly relieved, but the atmosphere was still heavy. 5 years might seem long, but it passed in the blink of an eye. What would happen to the talisman sect 5 years later if the formation was broken? I have finally touched the threshold of the Emperor realm after reconstructing my body and with the blessing of fate. However, it is still very difficult to break through. I am not sure if I can break through within 5 years. Even if I do, I may not be able to compete with DE. DE is unfathomable. The Supreme Master of the Nine Suns spoke, and the atmosphere became even more serious. Then what should we do? An elder spoke. Was he just going to sit and wait for death? Just wait for 5 years for DE and Martial Emperor to come? No matter what, we still have 5 years. 5 years is enough for many changes to happen. We might have a chance. After Bai Shijin spoke, everyone discussed the next step. In the end, it was decided that all the resources of the Talisman sect would be opened up to provide for the cultivation of the sect's disciples. They would do their best to raise their strength to face the challenge in 5 years. Elders, I have something to discuss with the elders. You may leave first. At this moment, Lu Ming suddenly spoke, causing everyone to be stunned. Many elder-level powerhouses looked at each other, then cupped their fists and said, "Yes, Zongzi. We will take our leave." Lu Ming was now a Zongzi and his authority was above that of ordinary elders. Naturally, these elders would not say much. Although they had doubts in their hearts, they still took their leave. In the main hall, only 9 Sons Supreme, Yan Kuangtu, Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and a few of the most senior elders were left. Lu Ming, what do you have to discuss with us? Bai Shijin asked. What was it that required the elders to leave? They were curious. Seniors, I will be leaving Mount Liangyi for the next 5 years to cultivate in the outside world. Lu Ming said. Leave Mount Liangyi? Bai Shijin and the others were slightly stunned. Not bad. Lu Ming nodded his head solemnly. This was Lu Ming's decision. He had the bloodline of the 9 dragons. Only by leaving the Yin and Yang mountain, adventuring, and fighting with the strong could his cultivation level improve quickly. If he stayed in the Yin and Yang mountain, his cultivation would not improve much within 5 years, no matter how many resources he had. It would be good enough if he could break through to the spiritual god realm. However, what was the use of a spiritual god realm master when he faced DE? Wouldn't he still be slapped to death? Only by taking risks outside could he have a slight chance to grow to the level where he could fight DE. I agree with Lu Ming's idea. Lu Ming is still young and it's the golden age for cultivation. If he's trapped here, his achievements will be limited. He can only improve quickly if he goes out. The supreme martial artist of the 9 Suns said. Not bad. Yan Kuangtu nodded. Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others also nodded. But, if Lu Ming thinks of this, I'm afraid DE will think of it too. If Lu Ming goes out, DE will probably sense it through the 9 dragon bloodline. Wouldn't that be more dangerous? Bai Shijin muttered. Well, unless Lu Ming leaves the Eastern Barren Territory and goes to other areas to cultivate. Du Songjue said. I'm planning to head to the Central Continent. Lu Ming said. As long as the distance was far enough, even DE would not be able to sense the bloodline of the 9 dragons. However, Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others were still frowning. There's one more important thing, Bai Shijin said after a while. Ever since Master Liaozong disappeared, especially in the last few hundred years, the Central Continent's overlord forces have cut off all contact with the Talisman Amulet sect. Therefore, if we want to go to the Central Continent, we can't activate the interterritory teleportation array and directly teleport to the Central Continent or other territories. What? We can't teleport directly. Yan Kuangtu said. The others also frowned. The Eastern Barren Territory and Central Continent were very far from each other. The border between the 2 territories was a vast chaotic territory. This chaotic territory ran from south to north, separating the Central Continent and the Eastern Barren Territory. Usually, overlord forces like the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace would have contact with the overlord forces of the Central Continent. If one wanted to go to the central continent, they just had to take the interterritory teleportation array and directly teleport to the overlord forces of the central continent. But now, the Talisman Amulet sect no longer had any contact with the central continent's overlord forces. They had long cut off all contact and had no teleportation coordinates. There was no way to directly teleport over. If they couldn't teleport, they could only cross the chaotic domain and head to the central continent. However, the chaotic realm was extremely vast, extremely far away, and extremely dangerous. Even a spiritual God Realm Master would face the risk of death if he wanted to cross the chaotic realm. However, this was not the most important point. They were worried that Lu Ming could not be directly teleported to the central continent. If he walked out of the Yin and Yang mountain, he would definitely appear somewhere in the East continent. De might sense the 9-dragon bloodline and determine his location. This was what they were worried about. This can be so levered as well. As long as we work together and seal Lu Ming's 9-dragon bloodline aura for a while, it's still possible. However, even in the central continent, I'm afraid that there are spies of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. If Lu Ming is found out by Martial Emperor De in the central continent, it will be even more dangerous. Du Songjue said. He had thought through everything. Seniors, if I were still in the Talisman Amulet sect, I would be able to attract the attention of De and Martial Emperor. Then, De would not pay attention to the affairs of the central continent, right? Lu Ming said. You're still in the Talisman Amulet sect? Then how are you going to go to central continent? Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and even 9 Sons Supreme were a little confused. They did not know what Lu Ming meant. Seniors, look. Lu Ming waved his hand and a jade-like figure appeared in the hall. Heaven and Earth Jade Essence, you. You still have a Heaven and Earth Jade Essence? Bai Shijin and the others all widened their eyes and were tongue-tied. Back then, Lu Ming had taken out a Heaven and Earth Jade Essence. He did not expect to have another one. Chapter 986. 986 Soul Separation. That's right, it's Heaven and Earth Jade Essence. I obtained 2 Heaven and Earth Jade Essence in the Battle of Providence. Lu Ming said. 2. Everyone's heart trembled slightly. They could not help but envy Lu Ming's heaven-defying opportunity to obtain 2 Heaven and Earth Jade Essences. However, they were still puzzled. What did this have to do with Lu Ming heading to the central continent? Seniors, I've also obtained a secret technique in the Battle of Providence. It's called the Twin Forbidden Spell. Lu Ming then explained the Twin Forbidden Spell. Heavens, there's such a secret technique? Everyone was dumbfounded and shocked. This secret skill was simply heaven-defying. He was actually able to split his soul into 2 and create a clone that was equivalent to himself. The clone had the exact same aura and could cultivate on its own. This was simply a heaven-defying secret technique. I want to cultivate a second body and let it stay in the Talisman Amulet sect. The second body's aura will be exactly the same as mine, which is like another me. This way, I can firmly attract the attention of De and Martial Emperor here. He will think that I'm always in the Talisman Amulet sect. In this way, my main body can go to the central continent and explore. Lu Ming revealed his plan. The 9 Sons Supreme, Bai Shijin, and the others muttered to themselves. This was indeed a good idea. Lu Ming, what other materials do you need to cultivate the Twin Forbidden Spell? Bai Shijin asked. The most important things are the Elixir of Life and the Heaven and Earth Jade Essence. I already have these, but I still need some other materials. Following that, Lu Ming told him about some other materials. Lu Ming, we can gather all the materials you mentioned, but we might not have many treasures that can repair souls. Bai Shijin said. To practice the Twin Forbidden Scroll, one's soul had to be split into 2, which would undoubtedly cause great damage to the soul. After successfully practicing it, one would need a treasure to restore the soul, which would restore both the main body and the secondary body to their peak state. This was absolutely necessary, otherwise, it would have a great impact on the future practice. Treasures to recover the soul. You don't have to worry about that. My master and I have been to many secret places and obtained many treasures to recover the soul. We still have a lot of them now. Yan Kuangtu laughed and a storage ring appeared in his hand. He handed it to Lu Ming and said, "There are quite a few soul-concentrating stones in here, do you think it's enough?" Over the past year, Yan Kuangtu had gathered the soul power for the 9 Sons Supreme and had found many treasures to recover his soul. Lu Ming scanned the ring with his mind and found that there were hundreds of black stones in the storage ring that exuded a mysterious aura. They were the legendary soul-consolidating stones. Enough, enough. Lu Ming was overjoyed. Alright, we'll gather the other materials and let Lu Ming cultivate the second body as soon as possible. Bai Shijin said. Du Songjue and the others also revealed hopeful expressions. Lu Ming's talent was heaven-defying and he had the bloodline of the 9 dragons. It was indeed a waste for him to stay in the Talisman Amulet sect. If he were to risk his life and cultivate outside, he might be able to create a miracle. Moreover, even if he could not create a miracle and reach the level where he could fight against De, Lu Ming's survival was still a hope. Even if the Talisman Amulet sect was destroyed, Lu Ming could avenge it in the future and even rebuild it. They also understood why Lu Ming asked the elders to go out. This matter could not be spread. It could not be known to Martial Emperor De. Otherwise, it would be a waste of effort. Three days later, Lu Ming was sitting cross-legged in an underground cave in the Talisman sect. He activated the Twin Forbidden spell. More than 10 materials turned into a ball of liquid in his hands and covered the heaven and earth jade essence. Condense. Lu Ming's hands kept forming wonderful hand seals. Beams of light entered the heaven and earth jade essence. The heaven and earth jade essence glowed and fused with the materials. Its shape actually began to change slowly. Originally, although the heaven and earth jade essence had taken the form of a human, it only had a vague human shape. Its facial features were very vague. However, at this moment, the heaven and earth jade essence's facial features began to become clear. Its entire body began to change from top to bottom, and it began to transform into a body of flesh and blood. His internal organs, meridians, bones, and blood began to transform and appear as Lu Ming kept forming hand seals. Water of life. At this moment, Lu Ming took out the elixir of life and poured over 0.5 kilogram of it onto the heaven and earth jade essence. The heaven and earth jade essence began to emit an aura of life. It's time. Lu Ming's eyes flashed. The next step was the most crucial one. He would split his soul and merge it with the heaven and earth jade essence to create a second body. This step was very dangerous and difficult. If one was not careful, it would damage one's soul and even fail the cultivation. Lu Ming activated the Twin Forbidden spell and his body glowed. In the end, a ball of light and shadow emerged. It was very blurry but one could barely see that it looked exactly like Lu Ming. This was Lu Ming's soul. Crack! Lu Ming shouted and formed a seal. Instantly, Lu Ming's soul started to tremble and slowly split apart from the middle. Immediately, an unimaginable pain drowned Lu Ming. Roar! In an instant, Lu Ming's eyes were bloodshot and he let out a beast-like roar. It was too painful. It was too painful. This kind of pain was unimaginable. It was 100 times, no, 1,000 times more painful than the pain on the body. Those whose minds were not strong enough could collapse at this step and fail. This was the pain of the soul splitting, and it came directly from the soul. This little pain is nothing. Lu Ming growled. He concentrated on his heart and continued to operate the Twin Forbidden spell. The endless pain drowned Lu Ming, but he endured it. Lu Ming's soul was slowly splitting apart. The process was very slow and Lu Ming was suffering every moment. This kind of suffering continued for 3 days. Finally, his soul completely split. The split soul turned into a ball of light and entered the heaven and earth jade essence. At that moment, Lu Ming felt his mind go blank. His eyes were unfocused and he was extremely weak. No, hold on, I'm still cultivating the twin forbidden spell. Lu Ming roared in his heart. He finally came to his senses and continued to circulate the twin forbidden spell. The twin forbidden art was indeed a forbidden art. It was extremely dangerous to cultivate it. Every step was filled with danger. If one made a mistake, not only would the cultivation fail, but one's body would also suffer unimaginable injuries. Fortunately, Lu Ming managed to withstand it. Mind fire, separate into the clone. In Lu Ming's sea of consciousness, the mental energy fire was slowly separated from his soul. Lu Ming planned to completely refine the second body into an inscribed body. It was too energy-consuming for one person to cultivate two. During this period of time, Lu Ming often felt that he did not have enough energy. It was difficult to cultivate both martial arts and the path of inscription at the same time. He would always fall behind in one of them. During this period of time, Lu Ming had been focusing on martial arts and had fallen behind on the Tao of inscription. His progress was very slow. Therefore, Lu Ming planned to take this opportunity to separate the Tao of inscription. He would let the secondary body focus on the Tao of inscription, while the main body would focus on the martial arts. The second body, without any distracting thoughts, would cultivate the Tao of inscription, and its speed would definitely be terrifying. The main body, on the other hand, would focus on cultivating martial arts. This was a reasonable combination. Chapter 987. 987 Chapter 987 Second body completed, set off. Lu Ming sat quietly without moving. The heaven and earth jade essence was glowing and its body shape was slowly changing. A month later, the heaven and earth jade essence had completely transformed into a human body. It was a body of flesh and blood, and its appearance was exactly the same as Lu Ming. The muscles on his body were firm and well-proportioned, full of perfect lines, like the most beautiful piece of art from heaven. At this moment, Lu Ming opened his eyes, a smile on his face. The second body had successfully cultivated it. At this time, the second body also opened his eyes. However, there was no emotion in his eyes. His eyes were very empty and without any impurities, just like a newborn baby. Lu Ming's mind flickered. His mind seemed to be able to enter the second body's mind at any time. At this time, the second body showed a trace of emotion and nodded slightly at Lu Ming. The main body and the second body could communicate with each other. No matter how far away they were, the main body could sense what the second body saw and what happened. The main body could even receive what the second body understood. This was truly heaven-defying and unbelievable. At this moment, a purple mental energy fire was dancing between the second body's eyebrows. Countless runes suddenly appeared under his feet and spread in all directions, forming a large array. It's so fast. The inscribing speed is too fast. It's more than twice as fast as my original inscribing speed. Lu Ming was shocked. The second body was free of impurities, and if he did one thing, he would focus on another, which was naturally more effective. In the future, you will focus on the Tao of inscription. Lu Ming stretched out his hand and touched the clone's glabella. The cultivation experience that Lian Song had sealed in Lu Ming's sea of consciousness was transferred to the clone's sea of consciousness. Then, a scroll appeared in Lu Ming's hand and flew into the clone's glabella, disappearing. It was the all-formation diagram. Then, Lu Ming took out a storage ring and put it on. The storage ring contained all kinds of materials related to the Tao of inscription. Lu Ming gave all of them to his clone. The clone's palm glowed and a set of blue clothes appeared. The clone put it on and instantly, he looked exactly like Lu Ming. To be more precise, the clone was Lu Ming. It was no different from Lu Ming himself. The only difference was that the clone did not have Lu Ming's consciousness. With a single thought, the clone took a step forward, turned into a ray of light, and entered the space between Lu Ming's eyebrows. Lu Ming's mind sank into his sea of consciousness and found the clone sitting cross-legged in his sea of consciousness, quietly cultivating the inscription Tao. It's time to recover my soul force. Lu Ming had an idea and reappeared. He then took out the soul consolidation stone and started to recover his soul force. After all, splitting one's soul in two was too much of a loss. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, another month had passed. Lu Ming had been in seclusion for 2 months. It's time to go. Lu Ming opened his eyes. After a month of refining the soul consolidating stone, the soul force of his main body and his secondary body had almost fully recovered. He then entered his sea of consciousness, got up, and walked out of the secret room. Outside the secret chamber, Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, Yan Kuangtu, and the 9 Sons Supreme were waiting. Lu Ming has come out. Yan Kuangtu's eyes lit up. Lu Ming, how's your cultivation going? Did you succeed? Bai Shijin asked. The rest of them looked at Lu Ming with anticipation. Lu Ming smiled and a light flashed between his brows. He walked out and stood beside Lu Ming. The two of them were identical, both wearing blue robes. The gazes of 9 Sons Supreme and the other 3 immediately fell on the second body. They sensed it carefully, and then their eyes revealed amazement. Wonderful, wonderful, this is simply a work of art that surpasses the heavens. Bai Shijin was extremely shocked and sighed. It is indeed a stroke of good fortune. With such a body in the Talisman Amulet sect, as long as he shows his face occasionally, DE will definitely think that Lu Ming has always been here. Supreme 9 Sons said. Lu Ming, when do you plan to leave? Du Songjue asked. We'll set off in 2 days. Lu Ming said. Well, before we set off, we'll first seal the aura of your 9-dragon bloodline. He said. Du Songjue nodded. Lu Ming bade farewell to the few of them and went to the Lu family residence. When Lu Yuntian and Li Ping saw 2 identical Lu Ming standing in front of them, they were stunned for a long time. If it wasn't for the fact that the eyes of the main body and the secondary body were different, they wouldn't be able to recognize which was the main and which was the secondary. Ming, are you going to leave? Li Ping asked. Lu Ming nodded. He only planned to tell Lu Yuntian and Li Ping about the main body and the secondary body. He did not tell anyone else. Ming, don't worry. Your second body is also half of your soul, which means you're with us. Lu Yuntian said. Indeed, the main body and the secondary body could communicate with each other. The secondary body was equivalent to Lu Ming. Father, here are some cultivation and martial arts techniques. Take them and cultivate them yourself. In the future, if there are any descendants of the Lu family, mystical sword sect, or Hua family who have good character and comprehension, you can pass them on to them. Lu Ming took out a stack of secret manuals and passed them to Lu Yuntian. Lu Yuntian took the book and casually flipped through it. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. This. A god-grade cultivation technique. Lu Yuntian was incomparably shocked. That's right. The moment he opened it, he saw that it was a god-tier cultivation technique, the heaven-warping divine technique. Yes, there are 2 deity-level cultivation techniques, and the rest are demigod-level martial arts techniques. Lu Ming nodded. Lu Ming had obtained all of these in the Battle of Providence. With these cultivation methods and martial arts techniques, he believed that the Lu family would definitely rise. Lu Yuntian took a few deep breaths before he put away the secret manual solemnly. 2 days later, Lu Ming was sitting cross-legged in a secret chamber. The 9-dragon bloodline was suspended above his head. Bai Shijin and the others were beside him, constantly condensing inscriptions and covering the 9-dragon bloodline. They only stopped after half a day. The 9-dragon bloodline seeped into Lu Ming's body, and he opened his eyes. Lu Ming, now that your 9-dragon bloodline has reached the 6th level of the divine level, your aura is too powerful. Even if we join forces, we can only seal it for half a year. After half a year, the seal will no longer be able to seal the aura of the 9-dragon bloodline. Bai Shijin said. Half a year is enough. Lu Ming nodded. Half a year later, he would definitely be far away from the East Continent. No matter how heaven-defying martial Emperor De was, he would not be able to sense him. Lu Ming, take care. I hope to see you again in the future. You're already able to shock the world. Yan Kuangtu patted Lu Ming's shoulder. Big brother Yan, senior Jiuyang, goodbye. Lu Ming cupped his fists solemnly and exchanged a glance with his second body. He then followed by Shijin, Du Songjue, and the rest and left in big strides. If Lu Ming were to bring his second body with him, he would undoubtedly be much stronger. However, he had no other choice now. He had to leave his second body in the Talisman Amulet sect. Together with Bai Shijin, Du Songjue, and the others, they arrived at a teleportation altar. Lu Ming, all the territories of the Talisman Amulet sect have been occupied by Martial Emperor De. The territories near the chaotic realm must have been occupied as well. The teleportation altars in those territories must be closely guarded. However, my Talisman Amulet sect also has a secret teleportation altar hidden in the mountains and forests. You can teleport to that secret place. The rest will be up to you. Bai Shijin warned. Thank you, Senior White, Senior Du, and take care of your slaviers. Lu Ming cupped his fists and stepped into the teleportation altar. The teleportation altar glowed and formed a vortex. Lu Ming disappeared. Chapter 988. 988 Chapter 988 Chaotic Domain. To the west of Mount Liangyi, there were more than a dozen large regions, which were close to the chaotic realm. The West Wind region was a large region that was close to the chaotic domain. Right now, the West Wind region had completely fallen into the hands of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. Some of the important cities had the shadow of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace's experts. In particular, there were more experts from the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace in the dozen or so large regions near the chaotic territory. It seems that Martial Emperor De has indeed taken precautions. He is afraid that I will teleport out of the Talisman Amulet sect and head to the central continent. A black-robed young man was flying in the sky above a forest. The black-robed young man was Lu Ming. After he was teleported out of the Talisman Amulet sect, he appeared in an underground cave. That underground cave was the teleportation array that the Talisman Amulet sect had secretly built. Then, Lu Ming took out the aura-concealing talisman that he had prepared earlier and stuck it on his body to conceal his aura. He had no choice. Now that the mental energy fire had been transferred to his second body, even if he understood the principle and technique, he could not inscribe any inscriptions at all. Then, he changed his appearance and changed his clothes before he left the underground cave and flew toward the chaotic domain. Of course, Dandan was with him, but she had been staying in the mountain and river diagram all this time, gnawing on spiritual medicine and sleeping, euphemistically calling it recovery. Buzz! Buzz! A group of people flew over from the front. They were the experts of the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace. However, they only glanced at Lu Ming and flew past him. This won't do. It's better to run in the forest. We'll be too big of a target in the sky. If we meet someone with a meticulous mind, we might become suspicious. At the thought of this, Lu Ming landed in the forest and ran through the forest. A few days later, Lu Ming arrived at the western border of the West Wind region. There was a large city in front of him. Once he left the large city, he would enter the territory of the chaotic realm. I'll go to this city to buy some things before entering the chaotic realm. I heard that the climate in the chaotic realm is unpredictable, and some places are devoid of life. It's best to buy some food and bring it with you. Lu Ming thought to himself. With his current cultivation, it was fine even if he didn't eat for a year. However, he would still eat some food as a habit. Stop, pass through this platform. At the city gates, there were experts from the Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace standing guard. Anyone who wanted to enter the city had to step on a formation platform. Lu Ming had already learned that this platform could test out mental energy fire. If one cultivated the Tao of inscription and had an extremely strong mental energy fire, there would be a reaction when they stepped on the platform. The Empyrean Heaven Divine Palace wanted to trap the Talisman Amulet sect because they were afraid that the Talisman Amulet sect disciples would sneak out. However, Lu Ming was a pure martial artist now and did not have any mental energy fire. Naturally, he could pass through the platform easily and enter the city. Then, Lu Ming found a market and bought a large number of supplies. He then left the city and headed to the chaotic territory. The chaotic domain was a forbidden area to the majority of martial artists. Not only did it run from the north to the south, separating the central continent from the east continent, but it was also extremely vast and contained unknown dangers. Even if a spiritual god realm master was unlucky, there was a possibility of death. It was said that the land of chaos had extremely complicated terrains, such as deserts, swamps, barren mountains, and ghost lands. It had everything. Furthermore, the weather was constantly changing. It could be a clear sky one moment and a storm the next. There might even be flames falling from the sky, making it extremely dangerous. There were also some ferocious beasts and evil spirits hidden within. Some of them were extremely powerful, and even spirit god experts would die if they encountered them. Therefore, no one was willing to enter the chaotic realm. If they wanted to go to the central continent, they would have to use the teleportation arrays of the overlord forces. However, Lu Ming had no choice. He could not expose his identity. He could only move forward and cross over. After leaving the city, the road was smooth. After more than 100,000 miles, a barren mountain range appeared in front of them. There was no vegetation on the mountain range, and it was a barren land with only bare rocks. They had already reached the territory of the Chaos Realm. Lu Ming perked up, slowed down, and flew in. Lu Ming frowned the moment he entered the area of the desolate mountains. What a high temperature! The temperature from the sun here is dozens of times higher than in other places. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He was extremely surprised. He retreated for several miles and the temperature returned to normal. It was only a thin line away, but the temperature from the sun was completely different. Lu Ming was secretly amazed. He circulated his essential core to protect his body and flew forward. Gah! He had not even flown for a few thousand miles when a cry was heard. A giant fiery red bird appeared and pounced at Lu Ming like lightning. Before it even reached him, a wave of scorching heat was already heading towards him. Spirit Embryo Realm Beast. Lu Ming's heart skipped a beat. He did not expect to encounter a Spirit Embryo Realm ferocious beast the moment he entered the Chaos Realm. A long spear condensed in his hand. The long spear pierced through the air, and with a pu-chi sound, the beast was stabbed in the air. The devouring power burst forth and devoured the energy of the blood essence of the beast. What scorching power! It must be related to the high temperature here. Whether it was the beast's demonic power or blood essence, they were all extremely hot, like flames. However, under the condensation of the 9 dragons' bloodline, it was quickly refined. As he continued flying, Lu Ming realized that there weren't many ferocious beasts here. He would only encounter one occasionally, and most of them were below the 8th level of the spirit embryo realm. Devouring them was of little use to his cultivation. Hundreds of thousands of miles later, the desolate mountains disappeared, and what appeared in front of them was a desert. The boundless desert was golden in color, and it was impossible to tell how big it was. When Lu Ming stepped in, he was surprised to find that the temperature here was even more terrifying. It was 10 times higher than the desolate mountains and hundreds of times higher than the outside world. Not to mention the vegetation, even the most powerful demonic beasts would not be able to survive here. They would die from the high temperature. However, after Lu Ming entered, he was surprised to find that there were actually living creatures in the desert. Lu Ming saw a type of sandworm. Its shell was like a fiery red diamond, shining brightly and extremely hard. After that, Lu Ming saw a 100-meter-long centipede swallowing and spitting out the sun essence as if it was bathing in flames. As soon as it saw Lu Ming, it pounced at him. This centipede was at the great circle of the spirit embryo realm and had extremely powerful combat strength. The flames it spewed out from its mouth seemed to be able to burn everything. Its diamond-like shell was extremely hard and had an extremely terrifying defense. This centipede was much stronger than a martial artist at the great circle of the spirit embryo realm of the same level. The flames it spewed out could easily kill a martial artist of the same level. Lu Ming fought with it for dozens of moves and only killed it after erupting his dragon power. Then, he kept the entire centipede. This centipede was full of treasures. If he sold it, he could get a lot of raw stones. The desert was really vast. For the next 10 days, Lu Ming shuttled through the desert and experienced a few big battles. 10 days later, Lu Ming looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. Boom! 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 In front of him, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Terrifying lightning covered the entire sky like lightning snakes. It was extremely terrifying. Chapter 989. 989 Comprehending the Water Concept. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, dark clouds covered the sky, and heavy rain poured down like water. Below him was a water pool that stretched as far as the eye could see. Lu Ming was really in a daze. He was standing in a desert. The sun was shining brightly and the temperature was terrifyingly high. However, there were dark clouds and heavy rain in front of him. The difference was too great, and Lu Ming could not turn around. The Chaos Realm truly lives up to its name. Lu Ming sighed and flew forward. Chi La. As soon as he flew into the area with heavy rain, the temperature dropped sharply and returned to normal. However, in the sky, a lightning bolt as thick as an arm struck directly at Lu Ming. He activated his thunder concept, and a lightning bolt as thick as an arm shot out and destroyed the lightning bolt. Lightning flashed in the sky, and the next moment, another lightning struck. Lu Ming activated the thunder concept to resist. Such a strong thunder mentality. This is a good place to comprehend the thunder mentality. Lu Ming smiled. He was not in a hurry to move forward. Instead, he landed in the swamp below. He stepped on the water surface and moved forward slowly while comprehending the thunder concept. A moment later, Lu Ming suddenly opened his eyes. What a strong water mentality! The water mentality here is even stronger than the thunder mentality. Lu Ming thought to himself, his eyes shining with hope. He planned to comprehend the concept of water. Now that the War of Providence had ended, there was no need to rush to increase his cultivation in the short term. Lu Ming planned to take this opportunity to comprehend the concept of water. Since he had the 9-dragon bloodline to devour, comprehending one more concept would not affect his cultivation speed too much. Moreover, if he comprehended one more intent realm and fused 5 of them together, the power would be even stronger. After making his decision, Lu Ming closed his eyes and began to comprehend. With the blessing of fate, Lu Ming's comprehension ability had increased by 10 times. He was more in tune with the heaven and earth, and his comprehension speed was shocking. First, it was the force of water. In just a day's time, Lu Ming had successfully comprehended the force of water and reached the elementary level. Next, I'll have to fuse the force of water with the other intent realms. There's endless thunder here, so I can use the power of thunder to fuse my intent realms. Lu Ming thought to himself. Buzz! He flew up and rushed into the sky. Chi-la! Chi-la! In the sky, endless lightning bolts struck toward Lu Ming. Lu Ming released the force of water and 4 other concepts. However, Lu Ming did not unleash much power from the other 4 concepts. He only used them for defense. He mainly used the lightning to bombard the force of water and the 4 concepts to achieve the effect of tempering. Boom! 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 The thunderous rumbles continued, and the lightning bolts continued to strike. The intent realm and momentum were both shaking. Not enough, the power of the lightning is not enough. Continue upwards. Lu Ming continued to fly upwards. The closer he got to the clouds, the more terrifying the power of the lightning became. It kept bombarding the intent realm and the force of water. Right, this is the feeling. Lu Ming's eyes lit up. Now, his comprehension had increased tenfold, and even the speed at which he fused intents had increased greatly. He could fuse intents more effectively, faster, and more effectively. With the help of the lightning, Lu Ming continued to temper himself. In a short 10 days, Lu Ming had successfully fused the force of water with the 4 concepts. This speed was already extremely shocking. After the fusion was successful, Lu Ming could continue to improve his water concept. Moreover, he had many water-type profound meaning crystals with him. In combination with the environment, his terrifying comprehension ability, and the path understanding ancient tree, Lu Ming's speed of improvement was simply terrifying. It was as if he was riding a rocket. Lu Ming was cultivating in the water as he advanced. 3 days later, Lu Ming condensed the water concept rune in one go and raised his water concept to level 1. After that, the speed of his improvement had been increasing by leaps and bounds. It was only when his water concept reached level 2 that the speed of improvement slowed down. This was because at level 2, one couldn't just rely on intent crystals. Lu Ming stayed in the swamp for another half a month. His water concept had already been cultivated to level 2 upper tier. At this moment, Lu Ming had just crossed the swamp and arrived at an area with a more complicated terrain. In this area, there were swamps filled with poisonous gas, terrifying storms, and even areas filled with blood chi. Once, he was almost cut in half by a blood-red sword light. The blood-red sword light was not man-made, but rushed out of a blood lake. The sword light had at least reached the level of a spiritual god. Lu Ming did not move quickly. He cultivated as he hurried on his way. He had left the talisman amulet sect with the goal of cultivating. Although the chaotic domain was somewhat dangerous, it was still quite good for cultivation. During this period, he didn't only cultivate the water concept. He cultivated and comprehended all the other concepts. He had some high-grade intent crystals, which he had taken from his enemies in the Battle of Providence, such as Luo Tian and Wang Fenchen. High-grade intent crystals were more useful than middle-grade spirit stones. Under normal circumstances, low-grade intent crystals were for kings, and they were extremely helpful in cultivating first-level intent. Middle-grade intent crystals corresponded to the Sea of Soul realm, and they were helpful for level 2 intent. High-grade profound meaning crystals corresponded to the spirit embryo realm and were helpful to level 3 intent. As for supreme-grade intent crystals, they were equivalent to level 4 intent. Of course, once one reached the third level intent, it was extremely difficult to cultivate. Just relying on high-grade intent crystals wasn't enough, but cultivating with high-grade intent crystals would still be much faster. Just like that, Lu Ming hurried on his journey while cultivating. The essence realm of heaven and earth and martial techniques were not left behind. Danden's perception was very strong. Sometimes, when they encountered powerful existences, they would all go far away. Time passed day by day. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ming had been in the chaos realm for 3 months. Along the way, Lu Ming had experienced many things and encountered all kinds of terrain. Even though he could sense danger, he had encountered danger more than 10 times. The most dangerous time was when the sky suddenly split open and endless flames poured down. If it were not for Lu Ming's sharp spiritual senses and quick reactions to avoid it from a distance, he would have been in danger that time. That was because the flames were extremely terrifying. They poured down from the sky and turned an area of 100,000 miles into lava. Lu Ming broke out in cold sweat at the sight. Of course, Lu Ming had also gained a lot along the way. The wind, fire, and thunder intents had all reached the peak of level 3 and were about to break through to level 4. His earth mentality had also reached the peak of level 3 upper tier. As for the water concept, it had also broken through 3 levels and was now at the beginning of level 3. It was already very terrifying for the water concept to reach this stage so quickly. This was because Lu Ming had comprehended it on his own and not by devouring the 9-dragon bloodline. However, his cultivation didn't increase and remained at the early stage of the 8th level spirit embryo realm. His cultivation would only continue to improve when the water concept had caught up with the other concepts. In addition to these, in terms of martial techniques, he was getting closer and closer to the 7th step of the 9 dragons' heaven-treading steps. He believed that it would not take long for him to successfully cultivate the 7th step. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.